rain came down like judgment from heaven, sheets of water cascading across the endless Dakota territory. Lightning tore open the night sky, momentarily turning darkness into harsh daylight before plunging everything back into shadows. Morgan Hayes urged his exhausted horse forward, leaning into the storm. His clothes were soaked through his gray-streaked beard, dripping with rainwater, but his eyes remained fixed on the path ahead. At 49, the years had carved deep lines into his weathered face, each one a testament to loss and resilience. His broad shoulders still carried the strength that had once commanded respect in a federal courtroom, though they now bore a different weight. The abandoned cemetery appeared through the curtain of rain, a collection of forgotten markers tilting at odd angles across the hillside. Even in the deluge, Morgan could have found his way blindfolded. 4 years of monthly visits had etched the path into his memory, as surely as grief had etched itself into his soul. He dismounted, tying his horse to a gnarled oak at the cemetery's edge. The animal shook its mane, sending water flying, but Morgan paid no mind. He removed his hat in respect despite the downpour and made his way between the graves. 3 stones stood together beneath the shadow of an ancient elm tree, 2 small, 1 larger. Morgan knelt before them, uncaring of the mud soaking through his trousers. "I'm still looking," he whispered, his voice nearly lost in the storm. "I haven't forgotten my promise." The larger headstone bore the name Catherine Hayes, beloved wife and mother. The smaller ones read Emma Hayes, age 7, and Joshua Hayes, age 5. Shared the same date of death. Lightning flashed again and thunder rolled across the plains like distant cannon fire. Morgan remained kneeling, allowing the rain to mix with the tears on his face. It had been 4 years since the Maxwell gang had raided his homestead while he was away at court. 4 years since he'd returned to find his family butchered, their home burned to the ground. 4 years of hunting, waiting, and remembering. He might have remained there until morning, as he sometimes did, but something caught his attention. A sound that didn't belong. A whimper barely audible over the storm. Morgan's hand instinctively moved to the revolver at his hip. Years as a federal judge had taught him caution, and years of grief had taught him suspicion. He rose slowly, scanning the cemetery. Lightning split the sky again, and in that brief moment of illumination, he saw her. A young woman lay crumpled between 2 gravestones 30 yards away. Her dress was torn and muddied, her hair a tangled mess plastered against pale skin. She wasn't moving except for the shallow rise and fall of her chest. Morgan approached cautiously, years of frontier life having taught him that even the most innocent-seeming situation could be a trap. But as he drew closer, he saw the bruises on her exposed skin, the dried blood on her dress, and the vacant look in her eyes as they flickered open at his approach. "Miss," he called over the rain, "can you hear me?" She flinched at his voice, trying to push herself away, but lacking the strength. Her eyes, a startling shade of blue, widened with terror. "I won't hurt you," Morgan said, kneeling a respectful distance away. "You're injured. Let me help." The woman trembled, whether from cold fear or both, Morgan couldn't tell. She couldn't have been more than 22 or 23, though pain and exhaustion made her seem both younger and older at once. "What's your name?" he asked gently. Her cracked lips parted. When she spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. "Hannah," she managed. "Hannah Reed." Morgan nodded, moving slowly as he shrugged off his coat to offer it to her. "I'm Morgan Hayes. I have a ranch about 3 miles from here. I can take you somewhere safe, get you warm and dry." Hannah's eyes filled with tears. "You don't understand," she whispered. "My soul, it's no longer pure." The words hung between them, heavy with implications Morgan understood all too well. Before he could respond, a gunshot cracked through the night, the bullet spraying mud just inches from where they knelt. Morgan reacted instantly, drawing his revolver and pushing Hannah flat against the ground, shielding her with his body. His eyes scanned the darkness, searching for the shooter. Lightning flashed again, and Morgan's blood ran cold. Standing at the cemetery gate was a tall figure with a rifle, his face partially obscured by a wide-brimmed hat. But Morgan would have recognized that silhouette anywhere. Silas Maxwell, the man who had ordered the murder of Morgan's family. The man who had escaped the hangman's noose through bribery and intimidation. The man Morgan had spent 4 years hunting. "She's mine, Hayes," Maxwell called, his voice carrying over the storm with a mocking lilt. "Didn't expect to find you here, but it saves me the trouble of hunting you down later." Morgan's grip tightened on his revolver. "You're a dead man, Maxwell." Maxwell laughed, the sound as cold as the rain. "Many have tried. All have failed." He raised his rifle. "Hand over the girl, and I might let you live long enough to visit those graves again." "You'll have to kill me first," Morgan replied, his voice steady despite the rage building inside him. "With pleasure," Maxwell said and fired. The bullet whistled past Morgan's ear as he rolled a returning fire in one fluid motion. His first shot missed, but his second caught Maxwell in the shoulder, spinning the outlaw halfway around. Maxwell cursed, stumbling back. He fired again wildly this time, the bullet burying itself in a nearby headstone. Morgan's next shot kicked up dirt at Maxwell's feet, forcing him to retreat further. "This isn't over, Hayes," Maxwell snarled, clutching his bleeding shoulder. "I'll be back, and I'll take what's mine. The girl, your life, everything." Another flash of lightning, and when visibility returned, Maxwell was gone, vanished into the storm like a malevolent spirit. Morgan waited tense and alert, but no more shots came. Only then did he turn back to Hannah, who lay trembling on the muddy ground. "He'll come back," she whispered, terror in every syllable. "He always comes back." Morgan holstered his revolver and gently helped Hannah to sit up. "You know him," he said. It wasn't a question. Hannah nodded, her eyes haunted. He kept me for 2 months." Her voice broke. Please don't leave me here." Morgan studied her face in the dim light. Taking her with him meant putting them both in Maxwell's crosshairs. It meant ending his solitary existence, inviting complications and danger. It meant responsibility for another life when he'd already failed to protect the ones he loved most. But leaving her meant condemning her to death, or worse, a return to whatever hell she'd escaped. In Hannah's pleading eyes, Morgan saw echoes of Emma, his daughter, who had once looked to him for protection. Protection he had failed to provide. "I won't leave you," he said, finally, his decision made. "Can you stand?" Hannah tried but collapsed almost immediately, her legs giving way beneath her. Without hesitation, Morgan lifted her into his arms, surprised at how little she weighed. Like carrying a wounded bird, he thought. "Hold on," he told her, making his way back toward his horse. "We've got a ride ahead of us." As Morgan helped her onto his horse, then mounted behind her, Hannah slumped against his chest, her consciousness fading. "Thank you," she murmured. So softly he almost didn't hear it. Morgan said nothing as he turned his horse toward home, but his jaw was set with grim determination. He'd just made himself a target for the most dangerous outlaw in the territory. But for the first time in 4 years, he felt something besides grief and vengeance stirring in his chest. Purpose. The Hayes Ranch sat nestled against a backdrop of pine-covered hills, isolated enough for privacy, but positioned to see anyone approaching from a distance. The main house, built of sturdy logs with a stone foundation, stood as a testament to Morgan's determination after losing his first home. A barn corral and smokehouse completed the homestead, along with a small vegetable garden that provided much of Morgan's sustenance. By the time they arrived, the storm had lessened to a steady drizzle. Hannah remained semi-conscious, occasionally murmuring incoherently as Morgan carried her from the horse to the house. Inside, Morgan moved efficiently, despite his burden. He laid Hannah on his daughter's old bed in the small room off the main living area, then stoked the fireplace to life, adding extra logs to drive away the damp chill. Hannah's clothes were soaked and torn beyond salvaging. Morgan faced a dilemma he hadn't anticipated. Propriety demanded one course of action, but her medical needs required another. He settled for a compromise, retrieving one of his clean shirts and a blanket before returning to Hannah's side. She was shivering violently now, her lips tinged blue. "Miss Reed," he said firmly, trying to rouse her. "Hannah, I need to get you out of these wet clothes. You'll catch your death otherwise." Her eyes fluttered open, confusion and fear warring in their depths. "I'll step outside," Morgan continued, placing his shirt and the blanket beside her. "Change into this. It's all I have that might fit. Call when you're decent, and I'll tend to your injuries." Hannah nodded weakly, and Morgan retreated to the main room, closing the door behind him. He busied himself preparing hot water, clean cloths, and the few medical supplies he kept on hand, alcohol for disinfecting, needle and thread for stitching, and salve for bruises. When Hannah called, her voice barely audible, Morgan returned to find her swimming in his shirt, which hung to her knees with the blanket wrapped tightly around her shoulders. She'd managed to change but looked ready to collapse again. "May I?" Morgan asked, gesturing to her visible injuries, a cut above her eyebrow, bruises on her arms, and abrasions on her palms and knees. Hannah nodded, though she tensed when he approached. Morgan worked gently but efficiently, cleaning each wound with practiced hands. Neither spoke as he tended to her, the silence broken only by the occasional sharp intake of breath when he touched a particularly painful spot. "You've done this before," Hannah observed, finally watching as he wrapped a clean bandage around a deeper cut on her arm. Morgan's expression remained neutral. "I was a field medic before I became a judge. Picked up a few things." "A judge?" Hannah's eyes widened slightly. Morgan nodded but didn't elaborate. The cut on your forehead isn't as bad as it looks. Head wounds always bleed more than they should. He finished his ministrations and stepped back. You need rest and food. I'll make some broth. Why are you helping me? Hannah asked suddenly, her voice stronger than before. You don't know me. Taking me in has already put you in danger. Morgan paused at the doorway, his back to her. Let's just say I recognize what Maxwell does to people. Get some rest, Miss Reed. We'll talk more when you are stronger. He closed the door gently behind him, leaving Hannah alone with her thoughts. In the kitchen, Morgan mechanically prepared a simple broth, his mind racing. Maxwell's appearance was no coincidence. The outlaw had clearly been pursuing Hannah when she sought refuge in the cemetery. But Maxwell recognizing Morgan, that was unexpected. It meant the outlaw had been keeping tabs on him, perhaps waiting for the right moment to finish what he'd started 4 years ago. Now Morgan had inadvertently accelerated that timeline by taking in Hannah. He moved to the window, scanning the darkened landscape beyond. The rain had stopped, and a quarter moon now cast weak silver light across his property. No movement caught his eye, but Morgan knew better than to trust the apparent calm. Maxwell would be back, and next time he wouldn't come alone. When Morgan returned to Hannah's room with the broth, he found her sitting up, staring at a small framed drawing on the bedside table. It showed a young girl with pigtails, smiling broadly, missing her 2 front teeth. Your daughter? Hannah asked softly. Morgan nodded, setting the broth down beside her. Emma. She was 7 when... He trailed off, the familiar pain constricting his chest. Hannah looked up at him, understanding dawning in her eyes. Maxwell, she whispered. His gang. Morgan confirmed, his voice tight. 4 years ago, my wife and 2 children. I was away at court. By the time I returned, he shook his head, unwilling to revisit those memories. Hannah set the drawing down carefully. I'm sorry, she said, and Morgan could tell she meant it. If I had known, I wouldn't have brought this to your door. You didn't bring anything, Morgan replied firmly. Maxwell was already my problem long before you arrived. He nodded toward the broth. Eat. It's not much, but it'll warm you up. Hannah accepted the bowl gratefully, though her hands trembled slightly as she brought the spoon to her lips. After a few sips, color began returning to her cheeks. I was a teacher, she said suddenly, staring into the bowl. In Boston. I received a letter offering a position at a new school in the Dakota Territory. Good pay, housing provided. It seemed like an opportunity for adventure. A bitter smile crossed her lips. I was so naive. Morgan sat in the room's only chair, giving her space but attentive to her words. There was no school, Hannah continued. The stagecoach driver was in on it. He delivered me straight to Maxwell's camp. For 2 months I was... She swallowed hard. His property. To use however he wished. Morgan's hands clenched involuntarily, knuckles whitening. I escaped 3 days ago, Hannah said. Stole a horse while they were drunk. Rode until the horse collapsed, then continued on foot. I didn't know where I was going. Just away. She set the half-empty bowl aside. I thought I'd die in that cemetery. Maybe that would have been easier. No, Morgan said more sharply than he'd intended. Don't think that way. You survived. That takes courage. Hannah looked up at him, her eyes suddenly fierce despite her exhaustion. Not courage. Desperation. The fierceness faded as quickly as it had appeared. What happens now? He knows I'm here. Morgan stood, his decision already made. Now you rest. Tomorrow I'll teach you to shoot. Hannah's eyebrows rose in surprise. Shoot? A gun, Morgan clarified. If Maxwell comes when Maxwell comes, you need to be able to defend yourself. For a moment, Hannah looked as though she might protest. Then her expression hardened, and she nodded once. Yes, she agreed. I think I'd like that very much. Morgan moved to the door. Get some sleep. The door has a lock, if it makes you feel safer. He paused. No one will harm you under my roof, Hannah. I give you my word. As he turned to leave, Hannah's voice stopped him once more. Judge Hayes, she said quietly, what happened to your family? I'm truly sorry. Morgan didn't turn around. Morgan, he corrected. Just Morgan now. The judge died with his family. He closed the door behind him, listening for the soft click of the lock before moving away. In the main room, Morgan retrieved his rifle from above the fireplace and settled into his customary chair by the window. Sleep wouldn't come tonight, not with Maxwell out there wounded and angry, not with an innocent woman under his protection. For the first time in years, Morgan felt something besides the dull ache of loss and the burning desire for vengeance. He felt responsible for something other than retribution. It was an uncomfortable sensation, like blood returning to a limb, long numb. Outside, an owl called into the night. The moon continued its arc across the sky, and Morgan Hayes kept his vigil rifle across his lap, watching for shadows that moved against the darkness. Hannah woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar curtains. For a moment, panic seized her. Where was she? Then memory returned, bringing with it the events of the previous night. The cemetery, the rain, Morgan Hayes, Silas Maxwell. She sat up slowly, wincing at the protest from her battered body. The small room looked different in daylight. Simple but clean, with calico curtains and a handmade quilt folded at the foot of the bed. A child's room preserved like a memorial. Hannah noticed details she'd missed in the darkness. A small wooden horse on the dresser, a rag doll propped in the corner, a child's dress hanging from a peg on the wall. This had been Emma's room, she realized. Morgan had placed her in his dead daughter's bed. The thought should have been unsettling, but instead Hannah felt oddly touched. This room was sacred to Morgan. Placing her here meant he truly intended to keep her safe. A soft knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. "Miss Reed," Morgan's voice called. "Are you awake?" "Yes," Hannah replied, pulling the blanket up to ensure she was decent. "Please come in." Morgan entered carrying a tray with a steaming cup and a plate of what looked like cornbread and bacon. He'd clearly been up for hours. His clothes were fresh, his hair damp from washing, though his beard remained untrimmed. "Brought you breakfast," he said, setting the tray on the bedside table. "Figured you could use the energy." "Thank you," Hannah said, genuinely moved by the simple kindness. How long had it been since someone had brought her food without expecting something in return? Morgan nodded, then gestured to a bundle of fabric tucked under his arm. "Found some clothes that might fit. They belonged to my wife, Catherine. They're a bit dated, but clean and whole." He set the bundle on the bed, then stepped back, suddenly awkward. "I'll be outside when you're ready. Take your time." After he left, Hannah examined the clothes. A simple blue dress, slightly faded but well made. Undergarments. Even a pair of sturdy boots that looked close to her size. She dressed carefully, mindful of her injuries, and found that while the dress was a bit loose around the waist, it fit well enough. Looking in the small mirror above the dresser, Hannah barely recognized herself. The woman staring back had hollow cheeks and dark circles beneath her eyes. Her usually lustrous brown hair hung lank and dull, but the clothes made her feel human again. Not Maxwell's plaything, not a victim, a person. She ate quickly, surprised by her own hunger, then made her way outside. The Hayes Ranch was modest but well maintained. A split-rail fence enclosed the yard with a barn and corral visible beyond. Mountains rose in the distance, their peaks still capped with the snow despite the summer warmth. The air smelled of pine and fresh-turned earth. Morgan stood by the corral feeding an apple to his chestnut gelding. He looked up as Hannah approached, his expression carefully neutral. "The dress suits you," he observed simply. Hannah smoothed the fabric self-consciously. "It's very kind of you to lend it to me." Morgan shook his head. "Catherine has no need of it now." He hesitated. She would have wanted it used, not stored away gathering dust. Hannah sensed there was more he wasn't saying but didn't press. Instead, she looked around the homestead. "Your ranch is lovely." "It serves its purpose," Morgan replied. His gaze shifted to the hills beyond. "I built it after I lost everything. Needed somewhere isolated, defensible." A grim smile touched his lips. "Somewhere I could see trouble coming." Hannah followed his gaze, understanding the implication. "He will come, won't he?" "Yes," Morgan confirmed. "The question is when, not if." Hannah squared her shoulders. "Then I believe you mentioned teaching me to shoot." Something like approval flickered in Morgan's eyes. "That I did." He led her to the back of the property where he'd set up several empty bottles on a fallen log about 30 yards away. From a leather holster, he produced a revolver, smaller than his own, with a pearl handle. "Catherine's," he explained, offering it to Hannah butt first. "She was a good shot. Had to be out here." Hannah accepted the weapon gingerly, surprised by its weight. "I've never fired a gun before," she admitted. "Most haven't until they need to," Morgan replied. He positioned himself beside her. "Hold it firmly. Both hands for now. That's it. Thumb on this side away from the cylinder." For the next hour, Morgan patiently instructed Hannah in the basics of handling and firing the revolver. How to load it, how to aim, how to control her breathing to steady her shot. When she was ready, he had her fire at the bottles. Her first shot went wild, missing by several feet. The recoil surprised her, sending a jolt up her arm. "Again," Morgan encouraged. "Anticipate the kick this time." Hannah's second shot was closer but still missed. Her third clipped the edge of a bottle, sending it spinning, but not breaking it. Better, Morgan acknowledged. Remember what I said about breathing. Exhale as you squeeze the trigger. Don't pull it. On her fifth attempt, Hannah shattered a bottle, the sound of breaking glass oddly satisfying. Good, Morgan said, and for the first time Hannah caught a glimpse of a smile beneath his beard. Again. They continued until Hannah had broken 3 bottles and was beginning to feel comfortable with the weapon's weight and recoil. Her arms ached and her ears rang from the repeated gunfire, but she felt a strange sense of accomplishment. That's enough for today, Morgan decided finally. You're a quick learner. Hannah lowered the gun, studying it thoughtfully. It feels powerful, she admitted, after months of being powerless. Morgan nodded, understanding in his eyes. Power isn't good or evil. It's how you use it that matters. He held out his hand for the revolver. We'll practice more tomorrow. For now, let's get some water and rest. As they walked back toward the house, Hannah noticed Morgan scanning the horizon, his posture alert despite his casual tone. He was always watching, she realized. Always prepared. You said you were a judge, Hannah ventured. Before everything. Morgan's stride didn't falter, but something in his demeanor shifted. Federal judge, he confirmed. Based in Cheyenne for a time, then St. Louis. Traveled the circuit. That's how you know Maxwell, Hannah guessed. You presided over his trial. Morgan stopped walking, turning to face her fully. His eyes gray as storm clouds studied her with new intensity. How do you know about a trial? Hannah hesitated, suddenly uncertain. He talked about it. About a judge who tried to hang him. He said, she swallowed. He said he'd taken everything from that judge, but it wasn't enough. That someday he'd finish the job. Morgan's expression hardened. Maxwell was charged with robbery, murder, and worse. I sentenced him to hang. The night before his execution, he escaped. Bribed a guard, we think. 2 weeks later, while I was away on circuit, his gang raided my home. His voice grew distant. Catherine, Emma, Joshua. They didn't just kill them. They made them suffer first. Horror washed over Hannah. I'm so sorry, she whispered, the words entirely inadequate. After that, I resigned my position. Morgan continued, his tone flat. Spent 2 years hunting Maxwell and his gang. Managed to put 3 of them in the ground, but Maxwell himself always stayed one step ahead. A muscle twitched in his jaw. Eventually, I realized he was toying with me, leaving false trails, drawing me out. So I changed tactics, settled here, made it known I was done hunting him. His eyes turned cold. But I never stopped watching, waiting, preparing for the day he'd come to finish what he started. And now I've brought him to your door, Hannah said, guilt twisting in her stomach. Morgan shook his head. No, you've brought me an opportunity. They resumed walking, but Hannah's mind was racing. She'd known Maxwell was a monster. She'd experienced his cruelty firsthand. But learning the full extent of his depravity, understanding that her suffering was just one chapter in a long history of violence, somehow made it both worse and easier to bear. Worse because she now comprehended the depth of evil she'd encountered. Easier because she wasn't alone in her pain. As they reached the porch, Morgan paused again. Hannah, he said, his voice gentler than she'd heard before. What happened to you? What Maxwell did, it doesn't define you. Hannah felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes, but she blinked them away. My father used to say that our souls are shaped by our choices, not our circumstances. Sounds like a wise man, Morgan observed. He was, Hannah agreed quietly. A judge, actually, in Boston. Morgan raised an eyebrow but didn't comment further. Instead, he held the door open for her. Come inside. We should change those bandages, then I need to check the perimeter. The rest of the day passed in quiet routine. Morgan redressed Hannah's wounds, then spent hours walking the boundaries of his property, checking sight lines and potential approaches. Hannah, exhausted despite her brief time awake, dozed in a chair on the porch, Catherine's revolver within easy reach, as Morgan had instructed. By evening, Hannah's strength had returned enough for her to insist on helping prepare dinner. Morgan acquiesced with minimal argument, and together they assembled a simple meal of beans, cornbread, and coffee. They ate in companionable silence, the only sounds the clink of utensils against plates and the occasional call of birds outside. It was strange, Hannah thought, how quickly they'd established this tentative domesticity. 2 wounded souls sharing space connected by a common enemy and not much else. After dinner, as twilight painted the sky in shades of pink and gold, they sat on the porch, watching the sun sink behind the mountains. The air had cooled, and Morgan had draped a blanket around Hannah's shoulders without comment. It's beautiful here, Hannah observed, breaking the long silence. Peaceful. Morgan nodded. It is, most days. I can see why you chose it, Hannah continued, after everything to find somewhere that feels untouched. Morgan studied the horizon, his profile sharp against the fading light. It won't last, he said finally. Maxwell will come. Maybe tomorrow, maybe next week. But he'll come. Hannah pulled the blanket tighter around herself, trying to suppress a shiver that had nothing to do with the cooling air. What will we do when he does? Be ready, Morgan replied simply. Beyond that, I don't know. The honesty of his answer was oddly comforting. No false promises, no bravado, just the truth stark as the landscape around them. They watched the first stars appear in the darkening sky, neither speaking again until Morgan rose to light the lamps inside. In that moment of shared stillness, Hannah felt something she hadn't experienced in months: peace. Not safety, she wasn't naive enough to believe she was truly safe, but a quiet moment between storms. That night, after Morgan had checked the locks and taken up his position in the chair by the window, rifle across his lap, Hannah lay awake in Emma's bed. The events of the past days whirled through her mind: her escape, her near death in the cemetery, Morgan's unexpected rescue, and the revelation of his connection to Maxwell. What were the chances, out of all the people who might have found her in that cemetery, it was the one man who hated Maxwell as much as she did, the one man prepared to stand against him? Coincidence seemed too simple an explanation. Hannah's father had never believed in coincidence. God's hand moves in ways we seldom recognize, he used to say. Hannah wasn't sure she still believed in God, not after what she'd endured, but she couldn't deny the strange symmetry of her current situation. Sleep came eventually, bringing with it dreams of Boston, of her father's study, with its walls of leather-bound books, of the life she'd left behind. But even in dreams, shadows lurked at the edges. Maxwell's laugh, the smell of unwashed bodies, hands holding her down. She woke with a gasp just before dawn, heart-pounding sweat dampening her borrowed nightgown. For a disorienting moment, she thought she was back in Maxwell's camp. Then she recognized Emma's room, saw the first pale light of morning filtering through the curtains, and remembered where she was. Safe. For now. Hannah dressed quickly in Catherine's blue dress and made her way to the kitchen. To her surprise, the stove was already lit, a pot of conniffe brewing. Morgan sat at the table cleaning his revolver with methodical precision. He glanced up as she entered. Heard you cry out, he said by way of greeting. Nightmares. Hannah nodded, grateful he didn't press for details. They'll pass eventually. Morgan's expression suggested he knew better but didn't contradict her. Instead, he nodded toward the coffee pot. Help yourself, then we should change those bandages again. The routine of the previous day repeated itself. Breakfast, bandages. Shooting practice where Hannah improved enough to hit 7 out of 10 bottles. A simple lunch, more vigilance from Morgan, more rest for Hannah. It was late afternoon when Morgan suggested they ride into town for supplies. Town, Hannah echoed, unable to keep the anxiety from her voice. Is that wise? Necessary, Morgan replied. We're low on ammunition and I need to speak with someone. Besides, you can't stay hidden forever. I'm not sure I'm ready to face people, Hannah admitted. Morgan's expression softened slightly. The town is small, barely qualifies as one. Most mind their own business. He hesitated. But if you'd rather stay here... No, Hannah decided quickly. The thought of being alone at the ranch, even briefly, was more frightening than facing strangers. I'll come. An hour later, they rode toward the town of Pinneridge, Hannah seated behind Morgan on his gelding. The town was indeed small. A single dusty street lined with a general store, a saloon, a small church, and a few other buildings. People stopped to stare as Morgan and Hannah rode in, curiosity evident in their expressions. Morgan ignored the stares, dismounting outside the general store and helping Hannah down. Wait here, he instructed, tying the horse to a hitching post. I need to speak with someone first. Then we'll get supplies. Before Hannah could respond, Morgan strode toward the church, his posture rigid. Hannah remained by the horse, acutely aware of the curious glances from passers-by. She kept her eyes downcast, unwilling to meet their gazes. You must be the girl Hayes brought in, a female voice observed, startling Hannah. She looked up to find a woman in her mid-30s regarding her with frank assessment. The woman wore a simple dress, her auburn hair pulled back in a practical bun. A small general store apron marked her as a shopkeeper. I'm Catherine Johnson, the woman continued when Hannah didn't immediately respond. Most folks call me Kit. I run the mercantile with my brother. She nodded toward the general store. Don't believe I've seen you before. Hannah Reed, Hannah replied, finding her voice. I'm visiting Mr. Hayes. Kit's eyebrows rose slightly. Visiting, she repeated, skepticism evident in her tone. Must be quite the visit for Morgan Hayes to bring you to town. Man hasn't spoken more than 10 words to anyone here in years. Hannah shifted uncomfortably under the woman's scrutiny. It's complicated. I'd imagine so, Kit agreed, though her expression remained curious rather than judgmental. Well, Miss Reed, if you need anything while you're visiting, the mercantile's open until sundown. We carry ladies' necessities that Morgan might not think to provide. With that, Kit turned and headed back to the store, leaving Hannah to wonder what exactly the woman had inferred from their brief interaction. Morgan returned shortly, accompanied by an older man in clerical garb. The man's white hair and beard contrasted sharply with his black clothing, but his eyes were kind as they regarded Hannah. Hannah, this is Reverend Thomas Wilson, Morgan introduced. An old friend, Thomas Hannah Reed. Miss Reed, the Reverend greeted, inclining his head respectfully. Morgan has explained some of your circumstances. Please know that you have friends here should you need them. Hannah managed a small smile, touched by the man's gentle manner. Thank you, Reverend. Thomas has agreed to spread word that you're my niece come to stay after losing your parents in a fire, Morgan explained. Should anyone ask? Hannah nodded, understanding the necessity of the cover story. Thank you, she said again, this time to both men. It's the least I can do, Reverend Wilson replied. His gaze shifted to Morgan. I'll make those inquiries we discussed. Discreetly, of course. Morgan nodded, once a gesture of gratitude that seemed to communicate more than words could. After the Reverend departed, Morgan led Hannah to the general store. Inside, Kit greeted them with professional courtesy, showing no sign of her earlier curiosity. Morgan purchased ammunition, flour, coffee, and several other necessities, while Hannah browsed the limited selection of women's items. As Morgan was paying, the store's door opened, admitting a man in a sheriff's badge. Hannah tensed immediately, her hand instinctively moving toward the pocket where Catherine's revolver lay hidden. Hayes, the sheriff acknowledged, nodding to Morgan. His gaze shifted to Hannah, interest sharpening his features. And who might this be? My niece, Morgan replied without hesitation. Hannah Reed, from Boston. The sheriff's eyes narrowed slightly, as if assessing the truth of this statement. Didn't know you had family, Hayes. There's a lot you don't know about me, Parker, Morgan replied evenly. Sheriff Parker's attention remained fixed on Hannah. Miss Reed, he said, tipping his hat. Welcome to Pine Ridge, small town, but we look after our own here. Something in his tone made the words sound more like a warning than a welcome. Thank you, Sheriff, Hannah replied, keeping her voice steady despite her unease. Parker lingered a moment longer, then turned back to Morgan. Heard there was trouble up near the old cemetery 2 nights back. Gunshots. You know anything about that? Morgan's expression remained impassive. Can't say that I do. Been busy getting the ranch ready for Hannah's stay. Parker clearly didn't believe him, but didn't press the issue. Well, if you hear anything, you let me know. That's my job after all. With a final nod to Hannah, he left the store. Morgan finished his transaction quickly after that, and they departed with their supplies. As they rode back toward the ranch, Hannah could feel Morgan's tension in the rigid set of his shoulders. You don't trust the sheriff, she observed once they were well away from town. Robert Parker is a man who follows the path of least resistance, Morgan replied after a moment. And in these parts, that often means looking the other way when it's convenient. You think he might be working with Maxwell? Morgan's silence was answer enough. As the ranch came into view, Hannah felt a strange sense of homecoming. After just 2 days, Morgan's isolated homestead had become a sanctuary of sorts. The irony wasn't lost on her, finding safety with a virtual stranger in a place where danger could arrive at any moment. They were halfway to the house when Morgan suddenly reined in the horse, his body going rigid with alertness. What is it? Hannah asked, alarm sharpening her senses. Morgan didn't answer immediately, his eyes scanning the property. Then Hannah saw it too. The front door of the house stood slightly ajar when Morgan had definitely closed and locked it before they left. Someone's been here, Morgan said quietly, his hand moving to his revolver. Maybe still is. Fear shot through Hannah like ice water. Maxwell. Stay on the horse, Morgan instructed, dismounting carefully. If you hear gunfire, ride back to town. Find Reverend O. Wilson. He handed her the reins. Don't argue, he added when Hannah opened her mouth to protest. Just do it. Hannah nodded reluctantly, watching as Morgan approached the house with his revolver drawn. He moved with the careful precision of a man accustomed to danger, keeping to cover where possible, making himself a difficult target. When he reached the porch, Morgan pressed himself against the wall beside the door, then used his foot to push it fully open. No shots rang out. No movement came from within. After a tense moment, Morgan slipped inside, disappearing from Hannah's view. The minutes stretched like hours as Hannah waited, the horse shifting restlessly beneath her. Her hand gripped Catherine's revolver, ready to defend herself if necessary, but dreading the possibility. Finally, Morgan reappeared in the doorway, his weapon lowered but not holstered. He beckoned to Hannah, his expression grim. Hannah rode to the house and dismounted, leading the horse to the hitching post before joining Morgan on the porch. "They're gone," Morgan said, "but they left a message." Inside, Hannah saw what he meant. The main room had been ransacked, furniture overturned, Morgan's few possessions scattered. But worst of all was the message carved into the wooden table. "She's mine. You're dead." Below the crude lettering lay a child's rag doll, Emma's doll from the bedroom, its head severed from its body. Hannah's hand flew to her mouth, horror and revulsion washing over her. "Morgan, I'm so sorry. This is because of me." "No." Morgan cut her off, his voice hard as iron. "This is Maxwell. It's what he does. Terrorizes, threatens, destroys what others hold dear." He picked up the mutilated doll, his knuckles white with suppressed rage. "He thinks this will break me. Make me afraid." "Isn't it working?" Hannah asked quietly. Morgan turned to her, and the cold fury in his eyes made Hannah step back involuntarily. "No," he said simply. "It's making me certain." "Of what?" "That this time one of us isn't walking away." Morgan set the doll down gently, almost reverently. Maxwell just ensured his own death sentence. Again. As Hannah helped Morgan restore order to the ransacked house, she felt something shift inside her. The fear remained. She doubted it would ever fully disappear, but alongside it grew something else. Determination. Resolve. A certainty that Morgan was right. This would end only when Maxwell was dead. The sun set on the Hayes Ranch, painting the sky in fiery hues that matched the burning in Hannah's chest. No longer just a victim seeking shelter, she had become something else, a survivor with purpose. And as she practiced loading and unloading Catherine's revolver by lamplight, Hannah made a silent promise to herself. Maxwell had taken her innocence, her dignity, and her peace. He would not take her future as well. She would see to that herself, with or without Morgan Hayes' help. The following morning dawned clear and cool, with no sign of the previous day's invaders. Morgan had spent the night in his chair by the window, dozing in short intervals, but never fully surrendering to sleep. Every shadow, every sound had drawn his attention, his hand never far from his weapon. Hannah emerged from Emma's room shortly after sunrise, dark circles beneath her eyes suggesting her rest had been no more peaceful than Morgan's. She wore Catherine's blue dress again, her hair neatly braided to keep it from her face. The bruises on her arms and face had begun to fade to yellowing green, physical evidence of healing, even as the deeper wounds remained. "You should have woken me for a watch," she said by way of greeting, moving to the stove to prepare coffee. Morgan shook his head. "You needed the rest." "So did you, but Hannah countered, measuring coffee grounds with careful precision. "We can't both be exhausted if when Maxwell returns." Morgan couldn't argue with her logic, though the idea of sleeping while Hannah kept watch still struck him as backwards. His years as a judge then, as a widower seeking vengeance, had ingrained in him certain notions about protection and duty. But Hannah had already proven herself more capable than most, and practicality demanded they share the burden of vigilance. "Tonight," he conceded finally, "we'll take shifts." Hannah nodded, satisfied with this compromise. "I want to continue practicing with the revolver today," she said as she set the coffee to boil. "And perhaps you could show me the rifle as well." Morgan raised an eyebrow. "Planning on becoming a sharpshooter, Miss Reed?" A ghost of a smile touched Hannah's lips. "Planning on staying alive, Mr. Hayes." After a simple breakfast, they resumed Hannah's firearms training. Morgan was impressed by her determination despite her still healing injuries. She approached each lesson with intense focus, absorbing his instructions and applying them with remarkable precision for a novice. By midday, she could load and fire both Catherine's revolver and Morgan's Winchester repeater with reasonable accuracy. Her aim wasn't perfect, that would take months of practice, but she could hit a target at 30 yards consistently enough to be dangerous. "You're a natural," Morgan observed as Hannah reloaded the rifle. Hannah's expression turned wistful. "My father would be horrified," she said. "He believed in law and order, civilization. He thought the frontier was where such things went to die." "Your father never met Silas Maxwell," Morgan replied grimly. Hannah chambered around with a decisive click. "No, but I have." She raised the rifle sighted along the barrel and squeezed the trigger. "The bottle 30 yards away shattered, and I intend to be ready when next we meet." As they gathered the remaining intact bottles, Morgan's curiosity finally got the better of him. "You mentioned your father was a judge in Boston," he said casually. "What was his name? I might have known him." Hannah paused a bottle in her hand. For a moment, Morgan thought she might deflect the question. Then she straightened, meeting his gaze directly. "Edward Reed Blackwell," she said, though professionally he went by Judge Edward Blackwell. Morgan froze, the name hitting him like a physical blow. "Blackwell," he repeated. "The Edward Blackwell of the Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court." Hannah nodded, watching his reaction carefully. "You knew him?" "Of him," Morgan corrected. "Every federal judge did. His opinions on constitutional law were—" He shook his head, still processing the connection. "Your father was a legal giant, Miss Reed. Or should I say Miss Blackwell? Reed was my mother's name," Hannah explained. "I took it after—" She hesitated. "After my father was killed." "Killed?" Morgan's brow furrowed. "I hadn't heard. When did this happen?" 3 years ago," Hannah replied, her voice carefully controlled. "He was presiding over a case against Silas Maxwell." Morgan finished the pieces, suddenly clicking into place. "Your father was the judge who first tried Maxwell before my court got him." Hannah nodded, her eyes never leaving Morgan's face. "Maxwell escaped custody during transfer to federal jurisdiction. Before he fled east, he murdered my father in his chambers. Left him for me to find." Her voice cracked slightly, but she continued. "The authorities said it was a random act of violence, a robbery gone wrong, but I found a note pinned to my father's robes. Justice is blind deaf and now dead." Morgan's mind raced through the implications. "So when Maxwell captured you—" "It wasn't random," Hannah confirmed. "He recognized my name when I arrived in Dakota. I was to be his trophy. His revenge on my father continued through me." Morgan had thought himself beyond shock after 4 years of grief and pursuit, but Hannah's revelation stunned him. The depth of Maxwell's depravity, his methodical revenge against those who sought to bring him to justice, was more calculated than Morgan had realized. "Why didn't you tell me this before?" he asked, no accusation in his tone, merely curiosity. Hannah set down the bottle she'd been holding. "At first, I was simply trying to survive. Then after learning your history with Maxwell, I wasn't sure how you'd react. If you'd see me as additional baggage or—" She hesitated. "Or as bait." "Bait," Morgan repeated, understanding it dawning. "You thought I might use you to draw Maxwell out." "Wouldn't you?" Hannah challenged. "If it meant avenging your family." Morgan considered the question honestly. A week ago, before finding Hannah in the cemetery, he might have answered differently. But now, looking at the determined young woman before him, he knew the truth. "No," he said firmly. "Whatever Maxwell has done to either of us, we don't become him to defeat him." A relief flickered across Hannah's features, quickly replaced by resolve. "Then we stand together," she said. "Not as bait or protector, but as equals with a common purpose." Morgan nodded, a new respect for Hannah solidifying in his mind. She wasn't just a victim he'd rescued. She was a survivor with her own stake in this fight, her own ghost to put to rest. "Equals," he agreed, offering his hand. Hannah took at her grip, surprisingly strong. In that moment, their alliance shifted from one of circumstance to one of choice, two wounded souls united against a common enemy, each with their own reasons to see justice done. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the mountains, Morgan and Hannah sat on the porch watching the fading light paint the landscape in gold and amber. A companionable silence had settled between them, born of shared purpose and growing trust. "Tell me about your family," Hannah said, suddenly breaking the silence. "Not how they died, how they lived." Morgan stiffened slightly, unaccustomed to speaking of his lost loved ones as anything but victims. For 4 years they had existed in his mind primarily as the reason for his vendetta. Hannah's request forced him to reach further back to memories long buried beneath grief and rage. "Catherine was a school teacher when we met," he began hesitantly. "Smartest woman I ever knew. Could quote Shakespeare and shoot a rattlesnake at 50 paces. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. She had no patience for pretense or politics, which made being a judge's wife challenging at times." "She sounds remarkable," Hannah observed. "She was," Morgan agreed. "Strong-willed, compassionate, beautiful." He gazed out at the darkening landscape. "When I was appointed to the federal bench, she agreed to leave her family in Philadelphia to follow me west. Never complained even when conditions were harsh. Said she was proud to be part of bringing civilization to the frontier." Morgan fell silent, lost in memories. After a moment, Hannah gently prompted, "And your children? Emma was 7 when Morgan cleared his throat. She had Catherine's spirit and my stubbornness. Already reading at 4, arguing philosophy by 6. His voice softened. She wanted to be a judge like her father. Used to hold court with her dolls, issuing the most creative sentences for imaginary crimes. Hannah smiled at the image. A formidable little girl. You have no idea, Morgan agreed, his heart aching with both pride and loss. Joshua was younger, 5, quieter than his sister, but observant. Nothing escaped his notice. He shook his head, remembering. He collected things, rocks, feathers, interesting sticks, had them all categorized in boxes under his bed, said he was going to be a scientist and discover new animals. They sound wonderful, Hannah said softly. They were the best parts of Catherine and me, Morgan replied, surprised by how easily the words came now that he'd started. Everything good in us distilled and made new. They sat in silence again, the memories hovering between them like the fireflies now beginning to illuminate the gathering dusk. Morgan realized it had been years since he'd spoken of his family as people rather than victims. Years since he'd allowed himself to remember their lives instead of their deaths. What about your mother? He asked, eventually turning the conversation toward Hannah's family. You mentioned taking her name, but not much else. Hannah's expression turned pensive. Elizabeth Reed Blackwell. She died when I was 16. Consumption. She tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. She was gentle but strong in her convictions. Father used to joke that she would have made a better judge than he. And after she passed, it was just you and your father. Hannah nodded. He threw himself into his work. I threw myself into my studies. We orbited each other, connected by grief, but unable to bridge it fully. She sighed. I became a teacher because Mother had been one. It felt like a way to honor her memory. Morgan understood that impulse all too well, the need to maintain connections to those lost, to find meaning in their absence. His entire existence since losing his family had been defined by their deaths. Only recently had he begun to question whether that was truly honoring their memory or merely using it as fuel for revenge. As darkness settled fully around them, Hannah stood stretching, muscles still sore from her ordeal in subsequent firearms training. I'll take first watch, she offered. You need proper sleep, not just dozing in a chair. Morgan wanted to refuse to insist on maintaining his vigil, but exhaustion weighed heavily on him. A tactical part of his mind also recognized that alternating watches was the sensible course regardless of his protective instincts. Wake me in 4 hours, he conceded. Not a minute later. Hannah nodded, accepting Catherine's revolver when Morgan offered it. I'll be on the porch, she said. It offers the best view of the approaches. Morgan hesitated at the door, unaccustomed to entrusting their safety to someone else. But Hannah's steady gaze reassured him. She was no longer the half-dead woman he'd found in the cemetery. She was a partner in this strange alliance they'd formed. 4 hours, he repeated, then entered the house, leaving the door ajar so Hannah could alert him quickly if needed. Inside, Morgan moved to his bedroom, a space he rarely used, preferring his chair by the window for its tactical advantages. The room was sparse, functional, with few personal touches. A bed, a dresser, a small table with a lamp. On the wall hung a single photograph in a simple frame, Morgan, Catherine, Emma, and Joshua, taken in St. Louis shortly before their move west. Morgan sat heavily on the edge of the bed, suddenly overwhelmed by the day's revelations and the memories they'd stirred. Hannah Blackwell, daughter of Judge Edward Blackwell. Maxwell's vendetta spanning years and countless lives. The interconnectedness of it all seemed too precise to be coincidence, yet too chaotic to be design. He removed his boots and gun belt, but kept his clothes on, ready to move at a moment's notice. As he stretched out on the bed, Morgan realized it had been days since he truly rested. Despite his intention to remain alert, sleep claimed him almost immediately, pulling him into a darkness deeper than the night outside. Morgan woke to Hannah's hand on his shoulder, her touch light but insistent. Morgan, she whispered urgently, someone's coming. He was instantly alert, reaching for his revolver as he sat up. How many from where? Single rider, Hannah replied, already moving toward the door. From the east, approaching slowly. Morgan checked his pocket watch. 3 hours had passed, not the 4 he'd specified. Hannah had either miscounted or more likely decided the approaching rider warranted waking him early. Either way, he was grateful for her vigilance. They moved silently to the porch, where Morgan could see the faint outline of a horse and rider making their way along the trail toward the ranch. The moon, nearly full, provided enough light to track the approach, but not enough to identify the visitor. Could be anyone, Hannah murmured, positioning herself behind one of the porch pillars, revolver ready. In my experience, Morgan replied grimly. Unexpected visitors at this hour are rarely bringing good news. As the rider drew closer, Morgan raised his rifle sighting along the barrel. That's far enough, he called when the figure was within earshot but still a safe distance from the house. State your business. The rider halted, raising both hands to show they were empty. Morgan Hayes, a male voice called back. Reverend Wilson sent me. Said you'd want to hear what I have to say. Morgan lowered his rifle slightly, but remained wary. Dismount slowly. Keep your hands where I can see them. The rider complied, sliding carefully from his horse and approaching on foot, hand still raised. As he entered the pool of light from the porch lantern, Morgan recognized him as a young man from town, one of the stable hands who worked at the livery. Daniel Cooper. The young man introduced himself unnecessarily. I work for Mr. Jeffries at the livery. I know who you are, Morgan replied. What brings you here at this hour? Daniel glanced nervously at Hannah, who had stepped from behind the pillar, but kept the revolver visible. Reverend Wilson said I should come direct to you, not tell anyone else. Tell me what, Morgan prompted, patience thinning. There's men in town, Daniel said, lowering his voice despite the isolation of the ranch. 4 of them. Arrived this afternoon, been asking questions about you and... He nodded toward Hannah. A woman staying with you. Morgan's jaw tightened. What kind of men? The kind folks step aside for, Daniel replied. Armed, rough-looking. Their leader's got a wounded shoulder, wears it in a sling. Hannah's sharp intake of breath confirmed what Morgan already knew. Maxwell had arrived in Pine Ridge and he hadn't come alone. Where are they now? Morgan asked. Took rooms above the saloon, Daniel answered. Been drinking most of the evening. The leaders have been talking with Sheriff Parker, too. He shifted uncomfortably. Looked friendly the way they were conversing. Morgan exchanged a glance with Hannah. His suspicions about Parker's allegiances seemed confirmed. The Reverend said to tell you he's moved his sister to her friend's place outside town, Daniel continued. Said you'd understand what that meant. Morgan nodded grimly. Reverend Wilson's sister lived in a small cabin near the church, a cabin with a hidden cellar that had once sheltered runaway slaves during the war. Wilson was offering them sanctuary if they needed to leave the ranch. Thank you, Daniel, Morgan said, reaching into his pocket and extracting a silver dollar. For your trouble. Daniel accepted the coin with a nod. Reverend said to be careful. Said these men aren't just passing through. No, Morgan agreed. They're not. After Daniel departed, Morgan and Hannah retreated inside, securing the door behind them. The news, while expected, accelerated their timeline considerably. Maxwell was in Pine Ridge with at least 3 men backing him, and possibly the sheriff as well. We need to leave, Hannah said, already gathering essentials. 4 against 2 are poor odds, especially with the sheriff involved. Morgan watched her efficient movements, recognizing the logic in her assessment, but reluctant to abandon the home he'd built. Running means they win, he said quietly. Hannah paused, turning to face him fully. Dying means they win more definitively, she countered. This isn't surrender, Morgan. It's tactics. We retreat, regroup, and choose the battlefield rather than letting Maxwell dictate the terms. Her argument made strategic sense, yet something in Morgan rebelled against the idea of fleeing. He'd spent 4 years preparing for Maxwell's arrival, fortifying this property, planning his defense. The thought of abandoning it now felt like another failure. I know what you're thinking, Hannah said, her voice gentler. That leaving means you failed again. That you're letting Catherine and the children down. She moved closer until she stood directly before him. But this ranch isn't them, Morgan. It's just a place. Their memory lives in you, not in these walls. Her words struck at the heart of his reluctance, exposing the irrational attachment he'd formed to this property. In his grief-addled mind, he'd somehow equated defending the ranch with defending his family's memory, a substitution that made little sense in the cold light of reason. You're right, he admitted finally. We'll go to Wilson's sister's cabin. Temporarily, he added, unwilling to completely surrender his home. Just until we can deal with Maxwell on our terms. Relief flickered across Hannah's features. Good. We should leave before dawn. Maxwell will likely move at first light. They spent the next hour preparing, gathering only what was essential ammunition, food, water, medical supplies, and a few personal items. Morgan retrieved a small metal box from beneath a floorboard in his bedroom, emergency funds he'd kept hidden for years, anticipating a situation exactly like this one. As Hannah packed provisions in the kitchen, Morgan paused by Emma's room. After a moment's hesitation, he entered, his gaze falling on the small wooden horse he'd carved for his daughter's 5th birthday. He picked it up, running his thumb over the smooth surface, then tucked it into his pocket. Some things couldn't be left behind. By 3 in the morning, they were ready. Morgan saddled 2 horses, his own chestnut gelding, and a sturdy bay mare he kept as a spare mount. They loaded their provisions, working in near silence, every movement deliberate and efficient. As Morgan helped Hannah mount the bay, their eyes met briefly. No words were necessary. They both understood the gravity of their situation and the uncertain path ahead. They were no longer simply a judge and a teacher, no longer defined by their former lives. They had become fugitives, hunters, survivors bound together by shared suffering and common purpose. They rode east away from town, taking a circuitous route that would eventually bring them to the Wilson cabin from the north, minimizing the chance of being spotted. The night was clear, stars scattered across the sky like diamond dust, the waning moon providing just enough light to navigate by. Hannah rode well, Morgan noted with approval, another skill he hadn't anticipated. She sat her horse with the easy confidence of someone raised around the animals, her posture relaxed yet alert. "My mother insisted I learn to ride," Hannah explained when she caught his appraising glance. "Said a proper Bostonian lady should be comfortable in the saddle for social occasions. She never imagined I'd be using the skill to evade outlaws in Dakota Territory." The observation, delivered with dry humor despite their circumstances, surprised a short laugh from Morgan. It was the first time he'd laughed in he couldn't remember how long. The sound felt foreign, almost painful, as if his body had forgotten how to express anything but grief and anger. They rode in companionable silence after that, each lost in their own thoughts as the miles passed beneath their horses' hooves. The eastern sky had just begun to lighten when they crested a ridge overlooking a small valley. Nestled among a stand of pines sat a modest cabin, smoke curling from its chimney into the pre-dawn air. "Wilson's sister's place?" Hannah asked, reining in beside Morgan. He nodded. "Sarah Wilson Bradford, widow. Tough as rawhide and twice as useful. Thomas says she can outshoot most men in the territory." "Sounds like someone I'd like to meet," Hannah observed, a smile touching her lips. They approached cautiously, nonetheless, Morgan leading the way down the slope toward the cabin. When they were within hailing distance, he stopped and called out, "Sarah, it's Morgan Hayes. Thomas sent us." The cabin door opened immediately, revealing a tall woman with silver-streaked dark hair pulled back in a severe bun. She held a shotgun with the casual competence of long familiarity, though she lowered it upon recognizing Morgan. "About time you showed up," she called back. "Thomas said you'd be here before dawn. Was about to send out a search party." As they dismounted in the small clearing before the cabin, Sarah Bradford emerged fully onto the porch. She was older than Morgan by perhaps a decade, her face weathered by years of frontier life, but her dark eyes remained sharp and assessing. "This must be the young lady Thomas mentioned," she said, turning her attention to Hannah. "Said you were in some trouble, girl." Hannah straightened under the woman's scrutiny. "The trouble isn't of my making, Mrs. Bradford, but I find myself in the middle of it nonetheless." Sarah's stern expression softened slightly. "Rarely is in my experience. Come inside, both of you. I've got coffee brewing and breakfast nearly ready." The interior of the cabin was simple but meticulously maintained. A large stone fireplace dominated one wall, a cast-iron stove the other. A rough-hewn table surrounded by 4 chairs occupied the center of the main room, while a curtain partially concealed a sleeping area in the back. Everything was spotlessly clean, with the pleasant scent of pine soap and wood smoke permeating the air. "Stables out back," Sarah informed Morgan as she moved to the stove. "See to your horses, then come eat. We've got planning to do." While Morgan tended to the animals, Hannah helped Sarah set the table. The older woman worked efficiently, her movements economical yet graceful despite her age. She reminded Hannah of her own grandmother, who had run her Boston household with similar no-nonsense competence. "Thomas tells me you're Judge Blackwell's daughter," Sarah said without preamble, as she placed a platter of bacon on the table. Hannah nearly dropped the plate she was holding. "He told you that? Don't look so shocked, girl. Thomas and I don't keep secrets from each other." Sarah glanced toward the door to ensure Morgan was still outside. "He didn't tell Hayes, though. Figured that was your story to share." "I already have," Hannah replied, recovering her composure. "Yesterday." Sarah nodded approvingly. "Good. Secrets between allies get people killed." She paused in her work, fixing Hannah with a penetrating gaze. "Thomas also told me what Maxwell did to you. Not the details, didn't need those to understand, just the outline." Hannah felt heat rise in her cheeks, shame and anger mingling at the thought of her ordeal being discussed, even in generalities. "I see," she said stiffly. "No, you don't," Sarah countered, her voice unexpectedly gentle. "I'm not judging you, girl. Lord knows I've seen enough of man's inhumanity in my time." She resumed her work, adding biscuits to the table. "I just want you to know that While you're under my roof, you're safe, not just from Maxwell, but from judgment too. The simple statement, delivered without sentimentality or pity, caught Hannah off guard. Since her escape, she'd been braced for condemnation for the subtle withdrawal that often accompanied knowledge of a woman's ruination. Even Morgan, for all his decency, had been initially uncomfortable with the implications of her first words to him. My soul is no longer pure. Thank you, Hannah said quietly, meaning it. Sarah merely nodded as if the matter was settled and required no further discussion. When Morgan returned from stabling the horses, she greeted him with the same practical efficiency she'd shown earlier. Eat, she commanded, gesturing to the laden table. Then we'll talk strategy. The food was simple but abundant: bacon biscuits, eggs, and strong black coffee. Morgan and Hannah ate with the appetite of those who had ridden hard and slept little, while Sarah watched with satisfaction. Only when they had finished did she broach the subject that had brought them to her door. Thomas says Maxwell has 4 men with him, including himself, she began without preamble. Possibly 5 if Sheriff Parker is officially in his pocket rather than just looking the other way. Morgan nodded. Daniel Cooper confirmed 4 at the saloon, and Parker was seen conversing with Maxwell in a friendly manner. 5 against 2, Sarah calculated. Poor odds in a straight fight. We're not looking for a straight fight, Hannah interjected. Just justice. Sarah's eyebrows rose at Hannah's assertiveness, but she nodded in agreement. Justice comes in many forms, girl. Sometimes at the end of a rope, sometimes at the end of a gun. She turned back to Morgan. Thomas has sent word to the federal marshal in Bismarck, Marshal Reynolds. You know him? James Reynolds. Morgan's expression brightened slightly. Yes, good man, honest. He's 3 days' ride from here, Sarah continued. Thomas asked him to come with deputies. Discreetly. Morgan frowned. 3 days is a long time with Maxwell breathing down our necks. Which is why you'll stay here until Reynolds arrives, Sarah said firmly. My place is defensible, isolated, and Maxwell doesn't know about it. She gestured toward the back of the cabin. Got a root cellar that's well hidden. If trouble comes, you can disappear until it passes. The plan was sensible, safe. Yet Morgan found himself chafing at the idea of hiding for 3 days while Maxwell roamed free. 4 years of grief and vigilance had honed his desire for confrontation to a razor's edge, and the prospect of delaying that reckoning, even for tactical reasons, grated against his instincts. Hannah, observing the conflict playing across Morgan's features, placed a hand lightly on his arm. 3 days of patience for a lifetime of justice, she said quietly. Isn't that worth the wait? Her touch and words penetrated Morgan's reluctance. He nodded slowly, acknowledging the wisdom of the approach, even as part of him rebelled against it. 3 days, he agreed finally. But if Reynolds doesn't arrive by then, we make our own justice. Sarah and Hannah exchanged glances, a silent communication passing between them that Morgan couldn't quite interpret. Then Sarah rose, gathering the breakfast dishes. I need to go into town today, she announced. Keep up appearances. See what information I can gather about our visitors. She fixed Morgan with a stern look. While I'm gone, you two stay inside away from windows. No fires in the main fireplace. Smoke can be seen for miles. Use the stove only and sparingly. Her expression softened marginally. I'll bring news when I return. After Sarah departed on her sturdy mule, Morgan and Hannah settled into the enforced confinement of the cabin. The hours stretched long, filled with nervous energy and unspoken concerns. They cleaned their weapons, checked their ammunition, and discussed various scenarios for confronting Maxwell, depending on what information Sarah brought back. By mid-afternoon, restlessness had set in. Morgan paced the small cabin like a caged predator, while Hannah sat by a small window, a book from Sarah's modest collection open in her lap, but largely unread. Tell me about your work as a judge, Hannah said, finally breaking the tense silence. Before Maxwell, before everything. Morgan paused in his pacing, surprised by the request. Few had ever asked about his career with genuine interest, particularly in recent years, when his identity as a former judge had become little more than a footnote to his reputation as a grieving widower. What would you like to know? He asked, settling into a chair across from her. What drew you to the law in the first place? Hannah's question was sincere, her eyes attentive. Morgan considered the query, reaching back to motivations long buried beneath subsequent events. My father was a blacksmith, he began slowly. Honest man, hard worker, but he was cheated out of his land by a man with expensive lawyers and friends in government. His jaw tightened at the memory. I was 14 when we lost everything. Watched my father broken by it, not just financially, but in spirit. Hannah nodded, understanding dawning in her eyes. So you became what he needed but couldn't afford, a lawyer who would fight for justice. Something like that, Morgan acknowledged. Worked my way through school, clerked for a judge who saw potential in me, eventually made my way to the bench. A wry smile touched his lips. Ironic, isn't it? I became a judge to protect people from predators like Maxwell, only to lose everything to him anyway. Not everything, Hannah countered softly. You still have your principles, your sense of justice, your integrity. She closed the book in her lap. Those are the things that truly matter in the end. Morgan studied her thoughtfully. Hannah Reed Blackwell was a constant surprise, educated but practical, traumatized, but resilient young but possessing wisdom beyond her years. In another life, another time, he might have. He cut the thought short, uncomfortable with its direction. Regardless of their growing rapport, their alliance was one of necessity and common purpose, nothing more. Your father, Morgan said, changing the subject. His reputation preceded him even in Western legal circles. His opinions on the Fourth Amendment were particularly influential in several of my own rulings. Hannah's expression brightened at the mention of her father's work. He would have been pleased to hear that. He considered the protection against unreasonable search and seizure to be the cornerstone of individual liberty. Their conversation turned to legal matters, a safe, neutral territory where both could engage intellectually without venturing into more personal waters. Morgan found himself genuinely enjoying the discussion, their minds meeting as equals, despite the difference in their ages and backgrounds. Time passed more quickly after that, the shadows lengthening across the cabin floor as afternoon gave way to evening. Sarah had not yet returned, a fact that began to gnaw at Morgan's composure as the hours ticked by. She should have been back by now, he observed, moving to the window for what seemed the 100th time. Hannah set aside her book entirely. Perhaps she stayed in town longer than expected. To avoid suspicion. Morgan shook his head. Sarah's too careful for that. She said she'd return before dark. The implication hung in the air between them. Something had gone wrong. As if summoned by their concern, the sound of approaching hoofbeats reached them. Morgan moved swiftly to the door, drawing his revolver. Stay back, he instructed Hannah, who had already retrieved Catherine's gun from her pocket. A single rider appeared in the clearing, slumped forward in the saddle. Even in the fading light, Morgan recognized Sarah's mule and her distinctive silhouette. But something was wrong. She swayed precariously, barely maintaining her seat. Morgan holstered his weapon and rushed forward as the mule came to a stop before the cabin. Sarah nearly fell into his arms as he helped her dismount, her face pale beneath its weathered tan. Maxwell, she gasped as Morgan supported her toward the cabin. He knows about me, about you being here. Hannah held the door open, alarm evident in her expression as she took in Sarah's condition. You're hurt, she observed, noting the dark stains spreading across Sarah's left side. Knife, Sarah confirmed grimly as Morgan helped her to a chair. One of Maxwell's men caught me alone behind the general store. She winced as Hannah began examining the wound. Didn't get anything vital, I don't think. But they took my payment for my silence about you two. Morgan's expression darkened. Who give me names? Man called Jenkins, Sarah replied, gritting her teeth as Hannah cleaned the wound with whiskey from a bottle on the shelf. Maxwell's right hand, from what I gathered. Said they knew I was Thomas's sister. Knew about my connection to you. How? Hannah asked, working efficiently despite her lack of medical training. Sarah shook her head. Don't know for certain, but Parker was watching me from the moment I rode into town. Could have followed me here previously. Could have tortured information out of someone. She gripped Morgan's arm with surprising strength. They're coming, Hayes, tonight. Jenkins made that clear before he stuck me. Morgan exchanged a grim look with Hannah. Their sanctuary had been compromised before they'd spent even a full day within its walls. The timeline had accelerated beyond their worst expectations. How many, Morgan asked, his mind then already calculating odds exits defensive positions. All of them, Sarah replied. Maxwell Jenkins, the other two goons, and Parker's deputized 3 local boys to help. Her lips twisted in a pained smile. Got a proper posse now, he does. Said he's coming to arrest Hannah for theft and you for harboring a fugitive. Theft, Hannah echoed incredulously. What am I supposed to have stolen? Maxwell's horse, Sarah explained. The one you escaped on. It's a pretext, girl. They don't need it to be believable, just official sounding enough to give Parker cover for what's really an execution party. Morgan's jaw tightened. 8 armed men against the 3 of them, one of whom was already wounded. The odds were worse than poor. They were nearly insurmountable. "We need to leave," he said decisively. "Now, before they arrive." Sarah shook her head. "Too late for that. Jenkins gave me a head start deliberately. Said Maxwell wanted me to deliver the message, watch the fear in your eyes before they killed you." She grimaced as Hannah applied pressure to the wound. "They'll be right behind me, watching to the trails. We're trapped." The gravity of their situation settled over the cabin like a physical weight. Morgan moved to the window, scanning the darkening landscape with renewed urgency. No movement yet, but Sarah's warning left little doubt about what was coming. "The root cellar," Hannah suggested, finishing her ministrations on Sarah's wound. "You said it was well hidden. We could—" "No," Morgan interrupted, his decision already made. "I won't hide while they burn this place down around us, which is exactly what they'll do if they don't find us immediately." He turned back from the window, his expression resolute. "You two take the cellar. I'll draw them away from the cabin." "Absolutely not," Hannah countered, immediately rising to face him. "That's suicide, Morgan, and you know it. One rider has a better chance of slipping past them than three," Morgan argued. "I can lead them on a chase by time for Marshal Reynolds to arrive." "And if they catch you," Hannah challenged, "if they kill you, what then? Maxwell will just come back for us, and we'll have lost our strongest defender." She shook her head firmly. "No, we stand together or not at all." Sarah watched their exchange with shrewd eyes, her own pain temporarily forgotten. "You're both right," she said finally, "and both wrong." She gestured toward the back of the cabin. "The cellar is our best chance, but not to hide. To ambush." Morgan and Hannah turned to her, identical expressions of confusion on their faces. "The entrance is hidden behind that rack of preserves," Sarah explained, nodding toward a shelf laden with canned goods. "Ladder leads down to a space about 10 feet square. Dirt floor, timber ceiling, strong enough to hold weight." A calculating smile touched her lips despite her injury. "Strong enough that a man could stand on it without knowing what's beneath his feet." Understanding dawned in Morgan's eyes. "You're suggesting we lure them inside onto the cellar roof and shoot up through the floorboards," Sarah finished, "from a position they won't expect. Won't be pretty, but it'll even the odds considerably." The plan was ruthless, pragmatic, and likely their best chance at survival against overwhelming numbers. Hannah looked to Morgan, her expression resolute despite the grim nature of what they were proposing. 8 against 3, she said quietly. "We need every advantage we can get." Morgan nodded slowly, tactical considerations overriding his initial impulse to face Maxwell directly. "We'll need to make them believe we've fled," he said, thinking aloud. "Leave the door open, obvious signs of a hasty departure." "Leave that to me," Sarah replied, struggling to her feet despite Hannah's protests. "I know how to make a place look abandoned in a hurry." For the next 30 minutes, they worked with desperate efficiency to prepare their trap. Sarah directed the rearrangement of furniture to channel their pursuers toward the cellar's location. Morgan carefully loosened specific floorboards above the cellar to allow for clean shooting angles, while leaving them stable enough to support weight. Hannah gathered additional ammunition and supplies, securing them in the cellar along with extra lanterns. When all was ready, Morgan helped Sarah down the ladder first, mindful of her injury. Hannah followed, pausing halfway down to meet Morgan's gaze. "Together," she reminded him quietly. "Together." He agreed, something unspoken passing between them. In that moment, a recognition of the bond that had formed, forged in shared danger and common purpose. Morgan descended last, pulling the shelf of preserves back into position to conceal the entrance. The cellar was cool and dimly lit by a single lantern, the air heavy with the scent of earth and stored vegetables. Sarah had positioned herself against one wall, shotgun across her lap, her face pale but determined. Hannah knelt beside one of the loosened floorboards, Catherine's revolver ready in her hand. "Now we wait," Morgan said quietly, taking up position near the ladder. "And when they come, we give them a welcome they won't expect." Outside, the last light of day faded from the sky, plunging the Dakota wilderness into darkness. In that darkness, 8 riders approached, led by a man with his arm in a sling and vengeance in his heart. The trap was set. The hunters were about to become the hunted. And in a root cellar beneath a lonely cabin, 3 unlikely allies prepared to make their stand: a wounded widow, a traumatized teacher, and a former judge seeking redemption. Their souls had been marked by loss and pain, by violations both physical and spiritual. But in this moment, as they waited for their enemies to arrive, they found a purity of purpose that transcended their individual suffering. Justice was coming. One way or another, time stretched like molasses in the confined space of the root cellar. Morgan checked his pocket watch by the dim lantern light, nearly 9 in the evening. Sarah's wound had been rebandaged, and she now sat with her back against the wall, shotgun across her lap, her breathing shallow but steady. Hannah remained near one of the loosened floorboards Catherine's revolver held, with the quiet confidence of someone who had found unexpected strength in desperate circumstances. Morgan moved between the ladder and the shooting positions they had prepared, checking and rechecking their lines of sight. The plan was simple in theory, but fraught with risk. Let Maxwell and his men enter the cabin believing it abandoned. Wait until they were positioned over the weakened floorboards. Then fire upward, through the boards using surprise and position to overcome their numerical disadvantage. If it worked, they might eliminate enough of Maxwell's force to even the odds for the inevitable face-to-face confrontation that would follow. If it failed, Morgan pushed the thought aside. Failure wasn't an option, not with Hannah's life at stake, not with Maxwell so close to final justice. They're taking their time, Sarah observed quietly, breaking the tense silence. Jenkins isn't one for patience. Expected them by now. They're being cautious, Morgan replied. Maxwell isn't stupid. He'll approach with care, expecting a trap. Hannah shifted her position slightly, easing muscles cramped from stillness. What if they don't enter the cabin at all? What if they just surround it and wait us out? It was a possibility Morgan had considered. Then we adapt, he said simply. Wait for our moment. One will come. The quiet confidence in his voice seemed to reassure Hannah, though Morgan himself felt far less certain than he sounded. 8 armed men against their 3, one of whom was already wounded. The odds remained desperately against them regardless of their planning. Another hour passed, marked only by the soft ticking of Morgan's pocket watch and their measured breathing. Then finally the sound they had been waiting for, hoofbeats approaching the cabin, multiple riders moving with deliberate slowness. Morgan extinguished the lantern, plunging the cellar into complete darkness. Positions, he whispered, unnecessary but instinctive. He felt rather than saw Hannah and Sarah shift, readying their weapons in the blackness. Above them, horses whinnied as their riders dismounted. Heavy boots thumped on the ground outside the cabin. Low voices conferred, too muffled to make out specific words, but clear enough to identify multiple speakers. Spread out, a voice ordered louder than the others. Check the perimeter. Cooper Jenkins, with me. Morgan recognized that voice, Sheriff Parker, asserting his official authority, despite his corrupt allegiance. The cabin door creaked as it was pushed fully open. Floorboards groaned overhead as multiple sets of footsteps entered the main room. Looks empty, a new voice observed, younger, uncertain. Daniel Cooper Morgan guessed the stable hand who had brought them warning, now pressed into service by Parker. Too empty, a third voice replied, harder and more suspicious. No one leaves this neat when they're running for their lives. That would be Jenkins Maxwell's right hand, the man who had stabbed Sarah. Morgan mentally marked his position directly above the center of the cellar. Spread out, Parker ordered again. Check for any sign of where they might have gone. More footsteps moving throughout the cabin now. Morgan tensed, finger resting lightly against his trigger. Not yet. They needed more of them positioned over the cellar. Maxwell wants confirmation they were here. Jenkins said, his boots scraping against the floorboards as he moved. Something we can use to track them. I'm telling you they were here, Cooper insisted, his voice edged with nervous energy. Mrs. Bradford wouldn't have left town in such a hurry otherwise. And I'm telling you, something doesn't feel right, Jenkins countered. Bradford was wounded, she couldn't have gone far, and Hayes isn't the type to run. Morgan's muscles coiled with tension. Jenkins was too suspicious, too cautious. If he convinced the others to leave before they were properly positioned. As if reading his thoughts, Hannah shifted beside him. Her hand found his arm in the darkness, a gentle pressure communicating both reassurance and readiness. The simple touch steadied him, reminded him of their shared purpose. Above the footsteps continued. One set moved directly overhead, pausing near the preserved shelf that concealed the cellar entrance. Morgan held his breath. What's this? Parker's voice asked. Shelf's been moved recently. See the marks on the floor. A moment of silence followed, pregnant with danger. There's something behind here, Parker continued. Jenkins, Cooper, give me a hand. The sound of the preserved shelf being dragged away from the wall sent a surge of alarm through Morgan. Their hidden position was about to be compromised. The plan was unraveling before it had properly begun. Now, Morgan whispered urgently, raising his rifle toward the specific floorboard he had loosened earlier. 3 shots rang out simultaneously, Morgan's rifle, Hannah's revolver, and Sarah's shotgun, each targeting a different section of the cellar ceiling. The reports were deafening in the confined space, the muzzle flashes momentarily blinding after the complete darkness. Chaos erupted above them. A body crashed to the floor, Parker judging by the position. Someone screamed in pain. Boots scrambled across the floorboards as Maxwell's men sought cover or returned fire blindly through the floor. "What the hell?" Jenkins' voice shouted. "They're below us." More gunfire erupted, bullets splintering through floorboards in all directions. Morgan rolled to a new position, avoiding the areas being fired upon, then squeezed off another shot toward a moving shadow visible through the gaps in the floor. A grunt of pain told him he'd found his mark. 3 down, potentially. But the element of surprise was gone now, and their position had become a trap of its own. They were pinned down with only one exit, the ladder leading up to what was now a shooting gallery. Back door, a voice above them commanded not Jenkins or Parker, but a new voice. A voice Morgan recognized instantly, sending ice through his veins. Maxwell. "Surround the cellar from outside," Maxwell continued. "Johnson, get the lanterns. We're going to smoke them out." The implications were immediately clear. Maxwell intended to set fire to the cabin, forcing them to either burn alive or emerge into waiting guns. "Morgan," Hannah whispered urgently beside him, "we need to move. Now." He knew she was right, but their options were severely limited. The cellar had only one entrance. Once they emerged, they would be exposed and outnumbered. "Sarah," Morgan called softly, "is there another way out of here? Any other exit?" "Root cellar extends under the back porch," Sarah replied, her voice strained with pain. "Far wall behind those barrels. Trapdoor leads out. Added it after a spring flood nearly drowned me down here." Morgan moved quickly in the darkness, feeling his way toward the barrels Sarah had indicated. Behind them he found a small wooden door set into the earthen wall, secured with a simple latch. Above, footsteps retreated from the cabin, followed by the ominous sound of liquid being splashed against the outer walls. "Kerosene," Sarah identified grimly. "They're not wasting time." Morgan worked the latch, pushing the trapdoor open to reveal a narrow tunnel sloping upward. Fresh air flowed through the opening, carrying with it the pungent smell of lamp oil. "Go," he instructed, helping Sarah to her feet. "Hannah, you next. I'll cover our retreat." Hannah hesitated. "Together," she reminded him firmly. "We agreed." The first flicker of flames became visible through the cracks in the floorboards above, casting eerie, dancing shadows through the cellar. Smoke began to seep through the gaps. "Together," Morgan conceded, knowing there was no time to argue. "But hurry." Sarah went first, crawling through the narrow passage despite her wound. Hannah followed, Catherine's revolver still clutched in her hand. Morgan came last, pulling the trapdoor closed behind him to slow the spread of smoke into their escape route. The tunnel was barely wide enough for a grown man, forcing Morgan to crawl on his belly rifle, dragged awkwardly alongside him. Ahead, Hannah and Sarah moved as quickly as their injuries and the confined space allowed toward a faint patch of starlight visible at the tunnel's end. Sarah reached it first, pushing open another small door concealed beneath the back porch steps. She peered cautiously into the night, then withdrew quickly as a bullet splintered the wood near her head. "They've got the perimeter covered," she whispered back to Hannah and Morgan. "At least 2 men that I can see, maybe more." The cabin was fully ablaze now, flames leaping toward the night sky, illuminating the clearing around it. Smoke billowed from every window and door, creating a choking haze that drifted across the property. The fire provided both problem and opportunity. It limited visibility, but also created shadows and distractions they might use to their advantage. "We need a diversion," Morgan decided, mind racing through their limited options. Something to draw their attention away from this side of the cabin. Hannah reached into her pocket, producing a small metal object that gleamed dully in the reflected firelight, Morgan's pocket watch. "Will this help?" she asked. Morgan understood immediately. "Perfect. Sarah, where's your stable?" "North side, about 30 yards from the house," Sarah replied. "Small shed, really." "There should be enough smoke cover between here and there if we stay low," Morgan said, taking the watch from Hannah. "When you hear the explosion, run for the trees behind us. Don't stop. Don't look back." "Explosion," Hannah echoed, concern evident in her voice. Morgan didn't elaborate, already calculating angles and timing. "Just be ready, both of you." Before Hannah could protest further, Morgan slipped past them and out of the tunnel, staying within the shadows beneath the burning porch. He paused, surveying the scene through gaps in the wooden steps. The cabin was now a roaring inferno, flames consuming the dry timber with voracious hunger. Maxwell's men had positioned themselves around the property, rifles trained on the front entrance, where they expected their quarry to eventually emerge, driven by fire and smoke. Maxwell himself stood slightly apart from the others, his injured arm still in its sling, a revolver held ready in his good hand. His face, illuminated by the firelight, bore an expression of cold satisfaction as he watched the cabin burn. Sheriff Parker was nowhere to be seen, likely dead or severely wounded from their initial ambush. Morgan opened the pocket watch, carefully removing its glass face. Using the polished interior of the case as a reflector for the firelight, he created a focused beam that he directed toward the small stable Sarah had indicated. It took several attempts, adjusting his position slightly each time, before the beam found its target, a stack of hay visible through the stable's open door. Dry summer hay, aged lantern oil stored nearby, and concentrated firelight. A combination that required only patience. Morgan held the improvised signal mirror steady, sweat beading on his forehead from both concentration and the heat of the nearby flames. After what seemed an eternity, but was likely less than a minute, a small tendril of smoke rose from the hay. Then a spark. Then with surprising swiftness, flames erupted, engulfing the stable in a secondary blaze that immediately drew shouts of alarm from Maxwell's men. "The horses!" someone yelled. "Save the damn horses!" Several of Maxwell's gang broke position, running toward the burning stable where their mounts were presumably tied. Maxwell himself turned toward the new fire, momentarily distracted. "Now," Morgan hissed, returning to the tunnel entrance. "Run for the trees. Go." Sarah emerged first, hunched low, despite the pain it clearly caused her. Hannah followed, Catherine's revolver held before her. Morgan brought up the rear, providing covering fire as they dashed for the tree line 30 yards behind the cabin. They had covered perhaps half the distance when a shout went up. "There they are, behind the house." Gunfire erupted, bullets kicking up dirt around their fleeing figures. Morgan returned fire, not aiming to hit, but to force their pursuers to seek cover, buying precious seconds for Hannah and Sarah to reach the trees. They made it barely the forest's edge, providing welcome concealment from both bullets and firelight. But their advantage was temporary at best. Within minutes, Maxwell would reorganize his men, and the hunt would begin anew through the darkened woods. "We need to split up," Morgan said decisively as they paused to catch their breath. "I'll draw them off. You two head for the church in Pine Ridge. Find Thomas." "No," Hannah replied immediately, her tone brooking no argument. "We've had this discussion already. We stay together." "She's right," Sarah added, wincing as she adjusted her position against a tree trunk. "Together we might stand a chance. Separated, we're just easier targets." Morgan wanted to argue, to insist on the logic of his plan, but a lifetime of legal training had taught him to recognize when he was outvoted. Besides, Hannah's steady gaze in the filtered moonlight communicated something beyond mere stubbornness, a promise perhaps, or a recognition of something neither of them had yet put into words. "Together then," he conceded, "but we need to keep moving. Maxwell knows these woods as well as we do." Sarah gestured northward, deeper into the forest. "Old Trapper's cabin about 2 miles that way. Abandoned years ago, but the structure's sound. Might give us somewhere to make a stand if it comes to that." It was their best option under the circumstances. With Sarah guiding them despite her injury, they moved through the forest as quickly and quietly as possible, alert for any sound of pursuit. Behind them, the glow of the burning cabin receded, though the occasional shout indicated Maxwell's men were organizing a search. The trapper's cabin, when they finally reached it, was little more than a single room with a collapsed chimney and half its roof missing. But its log walls were solid, and its position on a slight rise offered good visibility of the surrounding forest. Most importantly, it had only one entrance, a sturdy door they could defend. "Not exactly the federal courthouse in St. Louis," Morgan observed dryly as they secured the door behind them. "Prettier company, though," Sarah replied with unexpected humor, despite her pallor. She sank onto a rough bench against one wall, clearly exhausted by their flight through the woods. Hannah moved immediately to check Sarah's wound, which had begun bleeding again during their escape. "We need to rebandage this," she said, concern evident in her voice. "Use this," Morgan offered, shrugging out of his shirt and tearing it into strips. "Cleaner than anything we'll find in here." As Hannah tended to Sarah's injury, Morgan took stock of their situation. They had escaped the immediate threat of the fire, but were still in grave danger. Maxwell had lost at least 3 men, by Morgan's count Parker, and 2 others in the cellar ambush, but that still left him with a numerical advantage. And unlike them, his remaining men were uninjured and presumably well supplied. Their own resources were limited to the weapons they carried, the ammunition in their pockets, and whatever meager provisions might remain in the abandoned cabin. Not ideal for a prolonged siege, which seemed increasingly likely as dawn approached. "We should try to get some rest," Morgan suggested once Hannah had finished with Sarah's bandages. "Take watches in rotation. Maxwell won't risk moving through unfamiliar forest at night, but they'll be on us at first light. Neither woman argued with his assessment. Sarah, already half asleep from exhaustion and blood loss, merely nodded. Hannah, however, moved to sit beside Morgan at the cabin's single window, her shoulder touching his in the darkness. "I'll take first watch with you," she said quietly. "I couldn't sleep anyway." Morgan didn't object. The truth was, he welcomed her company, the steady presence that had somehow become essential to him in the short time they had known each other. They sat in companionable silence as the night deepened around them, the only sounds the soft chorus of crickets and Sarah's shallow breathing from across the room. "Do you think we'll survive this?" Hannah asked suddenly, her voice barely above a whisper. Morgan considered the question with the honesty it deserved. "I don't know," he admitted finally. "The odds aren't in our favor, but we've made it this far." Hannah nodded, accepting his assessment without fear or complaint. "I want you to know," she said after another moment of silence, "that whatever happens tomorrow, I don't regret any of it. Finding you, staying with you." She paused, searching for words. "Before, when Maxwell had me, I thought my life was over, that nothing good could ever come after what he did to me." "Hannah," Morgan began, but she placed her hand gently over his, stopping him. "Please let me finish," she said. "I need to say this. When I told you my soul was no longer pure, I believed it. Truly believed that something essential had been taken from me, something I could never reclaim." Her fingers tightened slightly around his. "But these past days, with you fighting alongside you, I've realized that purity isn't what I thought it was. It's not about what's been done to us. It's about what we choose to do despite it." The simple wisdom of her words struck Morgan with unexpected force. For 4 years, he had defined himself by his loss, by what Maxwell had taken from him. His identity had become inseparable from his grief and his thirst for vengeance. But Hannah, who had suffered violations he could scarcely imagine, had somehow found a way to reclaim herself beyond victimhood. "You're a remarkable woman, Hannah Blackwell," he said softly, turning his hand to clasp hers properly. "And you're a good man, Morgan Hayes," she replied. "Better than you give yourself credit for." In the darkness of the trapper's cabin, with danger waiting for them with the dawn, something shifted between them, an acknowledgement of feelings that had been growing since that rain-soaked night in the cemetery. Not spoken aloud, not yet, but recognized and accepted by both. They maintained their vigil through the night, taking turns to rest while the other watched. Sarah slept fitfully, her wound clearly troubling her despite Hannah's care. As the eastern sky began to lighten, Morgan gently shook both women awake. "They'll be coming soon," he said simply. "We need to be ready." They used the dim pre-dawn light to survey their surroundings more thoroughly, seeking any advantage the terrain might offer. The cabin stood on a small rise with woods on 3 sides and a narrow clearing to the south. Anyone approaching would have to cross that clearing, making them visible for at least 30 yards. Not much, but perhaps enough to make a difference. "I count 18 rounds for the rifle, 12 for each revolver, and 5 shells for Sarah's shotgun," Morgan reported after checking their ammunition. "Not enough for a prolonged firefight." "Then we make each shot count," Hannah replied, checking Catherine's revolver with practiced movements that would have been unimaginable to her just days ago. Sarah, pale but determined, positioned herself near the cabin's single window. "I may not be much good in a fight right now," she admitted, "but I can still pull a trigger if they get close enough." They didn't have long to wait. As the first rays of sunlight filtered through the trees, movement became visible at the forest's edge. Figures darting between trees, straws advancing cautiously toward the cabin. Maxwell's men spread out to present smaller targets, using the terrain for cover, just as Morgan would have done in their position. "I count 5, Morgan murmured, rifle raised, but not yet firing. "Maxwell Jenkins and 3 others." "Where's the stable boy, Cooper?" Hannah asked, positioned beside the door with her revolver ready. "Don't see him," Morgan replied. "Maybe he ran. Smart if he did." The attackers continued their advance, working their way steadily closer to the cabin. They were still out of effective range for the revolvers, but Morgan could have attempted a rifle shot. He held his fire, however, unwilling to give away their position until absolutely necessary. There remained a slim possibility that Maxwell's men didn't know exactly where they were hiding. That hope was shattered when Maxwell's voice rang out from behind a large pine 50 yards away. "Hayes, I know you're in that cabin. You and the Blackwell whore." Morgan felt Hannah tense beside him, but kept his attention focused on the forest. Maxwell was trying to provoke them, draw fire that would reveal their exact positions within the cabin. "You've got nowhere to go," Maxwell continued when no response came. "Nearest help is miles away. Come out now, face justice for harboring a fugitive, and maybe the women live. He's lying, Sarah observed unnecessarily. He has no intention of letting any of us walk away from this. Morgan nodded grimly. I know. He's stalling getting his men into position. He glanced at the cabin's rear wall. They'll try to surround us, attack from multiple sides at once. As if confirming his analysis, gunfire suddenly erupted from the woods to their right. Bullets splintered the cabin's logs, sending fragments of wood flying through the interior. Sarah ducked instinctively, though the shots were well above head height, warning fire designed to intimidate rather than kill. That was your only warning, Hayes, Maxwell shouted. Next volley goes lower. Morgan exchanged glances with Hannah, a silent communication passing between them. They had discussed this possibility during the night, had formulated a desperate plan that might give them a fighting chance. It was time to implement it. Maxwell, Morgan called back, pitching his voice to carry across the clearing. I want to talk just you and me. A pause followed, then Maxwell's reply. Talk about what Hayes seems to me we're past talking. About a deal, Morgan returned. One that benefits us both. Another longer pause. Morgan could almost picture Maxwell considering the offer, weighing the possibility of a trap against his curiosity and arrogance. What kind of deal? Maxwell finally called back. The kind where you walk away from here alive, Morgan answered. Come to the cabin, alone, unarmed. We'll talk terms. Laughter floated across the clearing, harsh and disbelieving. You must think I'm a fool, Hayes. I think you're a man who wants to live, Morgan countered. And right now that's in question. We've already killed 3 of your men. You're wounded. Your position isn't as strong as you think. A longer silence followed. Then, 2 minutes, I'm coming in. Any tricks and my men will burn that cabin to the ground with all of you inside. Morgan nodded to Hannah, who took up position behind the door, revolver ready. Sarah remained at the window, her shotgun aimed at the clearing where Maxwell would have to cross. Moments later, Maxwell emerged from the trees, walking with the confident stride of a man accustomed to intimidating others. His left arm remained in its sling, but his right hand was conspicuously empty of weapons. He wore a long duster coat despite the summer warmth, and a wide-brimmed hat that shadowed his features until he drew closer. When he reached the cabin door, he paused. I'm here, Hayes. Open up. Morgan nodded to Hannah, who stepped aside as he unbarred the door, pulling it open while keeping his rifle trained on Maxwell's chest. Maxwell entered slowly, his cold gaze sweeping the cabin's interior before settling on Morgan. He was younger than Morgan had expected, perhaps 35, with sharp features and eyes like chips of blue ice. A thin scar ran from his right temple to his jaw, adding to his menacing appearance. Judge Hayes, Maxwell acknowledged with a mocking tip of his hat. Been a long time. You're looking weathered. Maxwell, Morgan replied evenly, not rising to the bait. You wanted to talk. Talk. Maxwell's attention shifted to Hannah, who stood with Catherine's revolver aimed steadily at his heart. And the lovely Miss Blackwell, didn't expect to find you in such rustic company after our time together. His smile never reached his eyes. Still carrying that souvenir I left you with? Hannah's expression hardened, but she didn't respond to the taunt. Morgan, however, felt a cold fury rising within him at Maxwell's implication. You're here to discuss terms, Morgan reminded him sharply, not to reminisce. Maxwell spread his good hand in a gesture of false accommodation. Of course, business first. He glanced around the cabin again, noting Sarah's position by the window. So what's this deal you're offering my life for? What exactly? For Hannah's freedom, Morgan stated. You walk away, leave Dakota territory for good, and never come after her again. In return, I don't put a bullet in your head right now. Maxwell's eyebrows rose slightly. That's your offer seems rather one-sided, Judge. He took a step forward, stopping when Morgan raised his rifle warningly. Besides, Miss Blackwell and I have unfinished business. She stole from me, embarrassed me in front of my men. His cold gaze shifted to Hannah. No one does that without consequences. She's paid enough, Morgan replied, his voice hard as iron. More than enough. Maxwell studied him thoughtfully, a calculating look entering his eyes. You care for her, he observed. How touching. The aging widower finds comfort with a soiled dove. He shook his head, mock sympathy in his expression. She'll never be clean again, Hayes. Never be whole. I made sure of that. Hannah's voice cut through the tension, calm and clear. You're wrong, Maxwell. What you took from me wasn't what you thought. It wasn't my purity or my worth. She stepped forward, revolver still trained on him. It was my fear. You took that completely. I have nothing left to fear from you or any man. Something flickered across Maxwell's face, surprise perhaps, or the first hint of uncertainty. He hadn't expected this strength from a woman he'd sought to break entirely. Brave words, he said finally, his tone dismissive. But words won't save you when my men storm this cabin. He turned back to Morgan. Your offer is rejected, Hayes. Here's mine, surrender now, and I'll make your deaths quick. Fight, and I'll make sure you watch everything I do to Miss Blackwell before you die. I expected as much. Morgan replied, his expression unchanged. Just wanted to be sure we understood each other. Maxwell's smile returned cold and confident. Oh, I think we understand each other perfectly, Judge. His hand moved toward his coat, a subtle gesture that confirmed Morgan's suspicions. Now, if our negotiations are concluded— One more thing, Morgan interrupted. Something you should know. Maxwell paused, eyebrow raised inquiringly. Yes? I wasn't just a judge, Morgan said conversationally. Before that, during the war, I was a field surgeon, learned a lot about anatomy. He shifted his rifle slightly, aiming not at Maxwell's chest, but lower toward his abdomen. For instance, a gut shot is among the most painful of ways to die. Takes hours, sometimes days. No real way to treat it out here. Maxwell's expression hardened, his hand inching closer to his coat. Is that a threat, Hayes? Just an observation, Morgan replied. Along with this one, you're standing on a trap door. Confusion flickered across Maxwell's face, quickly replaced by alarm as he processed Morgan's words. He glanced down at the floorboards beneath his feet, then back up just in time to see Morgan nod to Sarah. The shotgun roared, not aimed at Maxwell, but at the floor directly in front of him. The already weakened boards carefully prepared by Morgan before Maxwell's arrival shattered under the blast. Maxwell's legs plunged through the opening, dropping him waist-deep into the small storage cellar they had discovered beneath the cabin. His right hand emerged from his coat, holding a derringer, but Hannah was faster. Catherine's revolver cracked sharply, the bullet striking Maxwell's hand. The small pistol fell as he howled in pain and rage, trapped and wounded, but still dangerous. Morgan stepped forward, rifle trained on Maxwell's head. That's the end of the line, Maxwell. Your men are next. Maxwell's face contorted with fury, blood dripping from his shattered hand. They'll kill you for this, Hayes. All of you. I don't think so, a new voice announced from the doorway. Morgan turned startled to find a tall man in a federal marshal's badge, standing in the open doorway, revolver drawn. Behind him, visible through the door, several more armed men had emerged from the forest surrounding Maxwell's remaining gang members, who now stood with hands raised in surrender. Marshal Reynolds, Morgan acknowledged, surprise and relief mingling in his voice. You're early. Reynolds holstered his weapon, stepping fully into the cabin. Reverend Wilson's message sounded urgent. Rode through the night with my deputies. His gaze settled on Maxwell, still trapped in the floor. Silas Maxwell. Been looking for you for a long time. Maxwell glared up at the martial, defiance in his eyes despite his precarious position. This isn't over, Hayes, he spat. Not by a long shot. Actually, it is, Reynolds replied, gesturing to his deputies, who entered to secure Maxwell. You're under arrest for multiple counts of murder, including Judge Blackwell, the Hayes family, and at least a dozen others we know of. He turned to Morgan. We found Sheriff Parker's body at the Bradford place. Got a deputy from the next county taking statements from witnesses. Looks like Parker was deep in Maxwell's pocket. As Maxwell was hauled from his improvised trap, cursing and threatening, Hannah moved to stand beside Morgan. Together, they watched as the outlaw who had caused them both so much suffering was finally taken into custody. His reign of terror ended not in a blaze of gunfire, but in the humiliation of a sprung trap and the cold finality of justice. It's over, Hannah said softly, the revolver now hanging loosely at her side. Really over. Morgan nodded, emotions he couldn't fully name washing through him. Relief, certainly. A sense of completion. But also something unexpected, emptiness. For 4 years, his existence had been defined by the pursuit of this moment. Now that it had arrived, he found himself adrift, uncertain of what came next. As if sensing his thoughts, Hannah's hand found his, her fingers intertwining with his own. Not everything is over, she said quietly. Just the worst parts. Morgan looked down at their joined hands, then at Hannah's face, tired, streaked with dirt and smoke, but radiating a quiet strength that moved him deeply. No, he agreed, not everything. The following days passed in a blur of official statements, medical attention for Sarah's wound, and the slow process of rebuilding what Maxwell had destroyed. Sarah's cabin was a total loss, but the community of Penridge rallied around her with plans already underway for a new home to be constructed before winter. Maxwell and his remaining men were transported to Bismarck to await trial accompanied by Marshal Reynolds and a heavily armed escort. The evidence against them was overwhelming, with multiple witnesses now willing to come forward, freed from the fear that had kept them silent for so long. Morgan and Hannah remained at Reverend Wilson's house in town, recovering from their ordeal and considering what might come next. Their time together had forged a bond neither had anticipated, but both now acknowledged existed. The question was, what to do about it. On the third evening after Maxwell's capture, they sat together on the church porch, watching the sunset paint the western sky in shades of gold and crimson. A comfortable silence had settled between them, the kind that comes only with true understanding. "I received a letter today," Hannah said finally, "from Boston, an old colleague at the school where I taught." Morgan nodded, keeping his expression neutral, despite the sudden tightness in his chest. "Will you go back?" Hannah considered the question thoughtfully. "There's nothing for me there anymore," she said after a moment. "My father is gone. The school has replaced me. Boston would just be memories." And here, Morgan asked the question carrying more weight than its simplicity suggested. "Here," Hannah repeated, turning to face him fully. "Here I found something I never expected to find again. Purpose. Strength." She paused, her eyes meeting his directly. Connection. Morgan understood what she was offering, not just companionship born of shared trauma, but the possibility of something deeper, something healing for them both. "I'm not a young man, Hannah," he said quietly. "I come with ghosts that may never fully rest. And I come with scars that may never fully fade," she countered. "Does that make either of us less deserving of whatever happiness we might find?" The simple wisdom of her question disarmed him completely. For 4 years, Morgan had denied himself any possibility of joy, viewing it as a betrayal of Catherine and the children. But Hannah's words forced him to consider, would Catherine have wanted him to live the rest of his life alone, defined only by loss and vengeance? "No," he answered finally. "It doesn't." Hannah smiled, the expression transforming her face in the golden light of sunset. "Then perhaps we should see what kind of happiness might be possible. Together." The word echoed between them, carrying all the meaning they had invested in it over their days of shared danger and purpose. Together they had faced Maxwell. Together they had survived. Perhaps together they could find a way forward that honored their past without being imprisoned by them. "Together," Morgan agreed, reaching for her hand. "I'd like that very much." 1 year later, the Hayes Ranch looked markedly different from the isolated homestead Morgan had built after losing his family. The house had been expanded with a new wing, added to accommodate both Morgan's law practice. He had returned to legal work, though not as a judge, and Hannah's small school for local children. The porch where they had once sat in tense silence now echoed with laughter and conversation. Sarah Bradford, fully recovered from her wound, was a frequent visitor, as was Reverend Wilson. Even Kit Johnson from the Mercantile made the journey out, occasionally bringing news from town and supplies for Hannah's growing collection of students. On this particular evening, Morgan sat on that porch watching Hannah in the garden, with their newest addition, Hope Hayes, 3 months old, sleeping peacefully in a basket while her mother tended to late summer vegetables. Hope had been a surprise to them both. Neither had expected to be blessed with a child at their age, especially after everything Hannah had endured. But her arrival had cemented the healing that had begun the night they met in that rain-soaked cemetery. The sound of approaching hoofbeats drew Morgan's attention to the road. A rider appeared, the familiar figure of a postal courier from Pine Ridge. "Mr. Hayes," one of the young men called, reining in his horse. "Letter for you from Bismarck." Morgan accepted the envelope, recognizing Marshal Reynolds' handwriting. He thanked the courier, who declined an offer to stay for supper, and continued on his route. Hannah approached as Morgan opened the letter, curiosity in her expression. "News?" Morgan scanned the contents quickly, then looked up, a mix of emotions crossing his face. "Maxwell's dead," he said simply. "Tried to escape during transfer to the territorial prison. Shot by guards." Hannah absorbed this information in silence, her hand moving unconsciously to touch Hope's downy head. "How do you feel about it?" she asked finally. Morgan considered the question honestly. A year ago, he would have felt triumph, perhaps, or at least satisfaction. Now he found his reaction more complex. "I think justice was served," he said carefully. "Whether by trial or by bullet doesn't much matter in the end. He can't hurt anyone else now." Hannah nodded, understanding the unspoken sentiment behind his words. Maxwell's death wasn't a cause for celebration, merely the closing of a chapter that had dominated both their lives for too long. "Will you tell Hope about him someday?" Morgan asked, watching his daughter sleep peacefully, untroubled, by the shadows that had once defined her parents' existence. Not about him specifically, Hannah replied thoughtfully, but someday when she's old enough, I'll tell her about how we met. About how sometimes the worst moments of our lives can lead to the best if we're brave enough to keep going. She smiled up at Morgan, love evident in her expression. About how two broken souls found wholeness together. Morgan drew her close, marveling at the journey that had brought them to this moment. From that rain-drenched cemetery to this sun-washed porch. From grief and violation to healing and hope. From solitude to family. Hannah had been right that night in the trapper's cabin, though neither of them had fully understood the truth of her words then. Purity wasn't about what had been done to them. It was about what they chose to do despite it. The choices they made. The love they built. The future they created together. As the sun set over the Dakota plains, painting the world in gold and amber, Morgan Hayes held his family close and silently thanked whatever fate or providence had brought Hannah Blackwell into his life that stormy night. Their souls, once wounded beyond measure, had found in each other not just healing, but transformation. Not purity as the world defined it, but something far more valuable: wholeness, redemption, peace together. 5 years later, spring 1892, the schoolhouse bell rang out across the valley, its clear tone carrying on the crisp morning air. Children spilled from the white clapboard building like water over stones, their laughter and shouts filling the previously quiet landscape. A few parents waited nearby with wagons and horses, ready to transport their young ones home to distant farms and homesteads. Hannah Hayes stood in the schoolhouse doorway, watching her students disperse with a smile that reached her eyes. At 28, she carried herself with a quiet confidence that had been hard-won through trials most couldn't imagine. Her chestnut hair, now streaked with a few strands of premature silver, was pulled back in a practical but becoming style. The simple blue dress she wore suited her slender frame, though observant eyes might notice she moved with a slight heaviness that suggested another Hayes might soon join the family. Mrs. Hayes, Hannah turned to find young Rebecca Johnson tugging at her skirt, a wildflower clutched in her small hand. "For you, ain't that?" Rebecca said solemnly, offering the slightly crushed yellow bloom. "Because you teached me to read today." Hannah accepted the gift with appropriate gravity. "Thank you, Rebecca. It's beautiful." She tucked the flower into her hair above her ear. "And you did wonderfully with your letters. Your mother will be very proud." Rebecca beamed, then scampered off to where Kit Johnson waited by their wagon. Kit waved to Hannah, a friendly gesture between women who had become genuine friends over the years, their initial awkward meeting at the general store long forgotten. As the last students departed, Hannah turned back into the schoolhouse to gather her books and papers. The building itself was a testament to how much Pine Ridge had changed. 5 years ago, it had been little more than a dusty outpost with a saloon, general store, and church. Now it boasted not only a proper school, but also a doctor's office, a small hotel, and most significantly a courthouse where Morgan practiced law 3 days each week. Progress had come to the Dakota Territory, now officially the state of South Dakota. The railroad had reached towns not 30 miles away. New settlers arrived each month, drawn by promises of land and opportunity. The frontier was steadily becoming less wild, more civilized, exactly what Catherine Hayes had once hoped to see. Hannah gathered her things, extinguished the lamps, and locked the schoolhouse door behind her. The walk home wasn't long, just under a mile along a well-worn path that connected the school to the Hayes Ranch. She enjoyed these solitary walks, using them to clear her eyes after a day of teaching and prepare for the evening with her family. Family. The word still occasionally caught her by surprise, a bright joy that would bloom unexpectedly in her chest. After what Maxwell had done to her, after believing herself ruined beyond any chance of happiness, she had found not just survival, but genuine fulfillment. A husband who respected and cherished her. A daughter who brought daily delight. A purpose that gave meaning to her days. And soon, God willing, another child to love. Hannah rested her hand briefly on her stomach, still flat enough that only Morgan had noticed the changes in her body. They hadn't told Hope yet, wanting to wait until they were more certain. At 5 years old, their daughter was bright and curious, always full of questions. She would have many about a new sibling. The Hayes Ranch came into view as Hannah crested a small rise. Like Pine Ridge itself, the property had undergone significant changes. The original cabin remained but had been expanded considerably, with a new wing for Morgan's home office and library and a larger kitchen that opened onto a covered porch. A proper barn had replaced the smaller structure, housing their growing collection of horses and livestock. Nearby stood a bunkhouse for the 2 ranch hands they now employed, both young men from town who had shown aptitude with animals and a willingness to learn. Most noticeable, perhaps, was the garden. What had once been a small plot of vegetables for Morgan's sustenance had blossomed into an extensive kitchen garden, a flower bed that blazed with color from spring through fall, and a small orchard of apple and cherry trees just beginning to establish themselves. It was a home in every sense of the word, not just shelter, but a place of safety, growth, and love. As Hannah approached, she spotted Hope playing near the corral under the watchful eye of Daniel Cooper, their more experienced ranch hand. The young man had come a long way from the nervous stable boy who had once brought them warning of Maxwell's arrival in town. Now 23, Daniel had proven himself trustworthy and capable, eventually earning a permanent position at the Hayes Ranch when he'd had nowhere else to go after the livery stable closed. Hope saw her mother and came running, dark braids flying behind her like ribbons in the wind. "Mama! Mama, Uncle Thomas is here," she called excitedly. Hannah quickened her pace to meet her daughter, sweeping the child into a hug despite her growing size. "Is he now? And what business brings Reverend Wilson out to visit us on a Thursday?" "He brought a lady," Hope whispered dramatically, her blue eyes so like Morgan's wide with the importance of this news. "She's pretty but sad. She's talking to Papa in his office." Hannah's curiosity was piqued. Reverend Wilson often brought people to Morgan for legal assistance, but Hope's description suggested something out of the ordinary. "Well then," Hannah said, setting her daughter down, but keeping hold of her hand, "perhaps we should go welcome our guests properly." They walked together toward the house, Hope chattering about her day helping Daniel with the new foal. Hannah listened attentively, though part of her mind wondered about the visitor. Few things brought strangers to their door these days, a welcome change from the time when danger had seemed to lurk around every corner. Inside the house was warm and inviting, with simple but comfortable furnishings. Hannah had added feminine touches over the years, curtains at the windows, quilts on the beds, paintings on the walls, but had been careful to preserve elements of the home Morgan had built. Catherine's photograph still held a place of honor in the main room, alongside a newer family portrait showing Morgan, Hannah, and Hope together. Hannah helped Hope wash her hands, then sent her to the kitchen to help Maria, the local woman who came in 3 times a week to assist with cooking and heavier household chores. Then straightening her dress and tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear, Hannah made her way to Morgan's office. She knocked lightly on the partially open door before entering. Morgan sat behind his desk, his expression somber but composed. Reverend Wilson occupied one of the chairs opposite, while a woman Hannah didn't recognize sat in the other. The stranger was perhaps 35, with fair hair pulled back severely and a complexion that suggested recent illness or significant stress. All 3 looked up as Hannah entered. Morgan's face immediately softened, the smile he reserved only for her, and hope warming his features despite the tension in the room. "Hannah," he greeted, rising to his feet. At 54, Morgan Hayes remained an imposing figure, his hair and beard now more silver than brown, but his posture still straight, his movements still decisive. Years of ranch work had kept him fit, though lines of experience marked his face more deeply than before. "I'm sorry to interrupt," Hannah began, but Morgan shook his head. "Not at all. In fact, your arrival is fortuitous." He gestured to the unknown woman. "Hannah, this is Mrs. Eleanor Jenkins. She's come to us with a rather unusual situation." The name registered immediately. Jenkins, Maxwell's right hand, the man who had stabbed Sarah Bradford, who had helped hunt them through the forest, who had died alongside Maxwell during the escape attempt, according to Marshall Reynolds' letter years ago. "Mrs. Jenkins," Hannah acknowledged, keeping her voice neutral despite the sudden acceleration of her heartbeat. "Mrs. Hayes," the woman replied, her voice cultured but strained. "I apologize for intruding upon your home. Reverend Wilson suggested your husband might be willing to hear my case given his familiarity with my late husband's activities." Hannah moved to stand beside Morgan, her hand finding his shoulder in a gesture both supportive and seeking support. "Of course," she said, though questions tumbled through her mind. "Any friend of Reverend Wilson's is welcome here." Thomas Wilson cleared his throat. "Mrs. Jenkins arrived in Pine Ridge yesterday," he explained. "She came to the church seeking assistance. After hearing her story, I believe Morgan should be consulted." Morgan covered Hannah's hand with his own, a brief touch that conveyed volumes. "Mrs. Jenkins has information regarding some of Maxwell's former associates," he said carefully. "Men who were not apprehended 5 years ago. Men who may now be seeking to continue Maxwell's work." A chill ran through Hannah, memories she had worked hard to put behind her, suddenly threatening to resurface. "I see," she said, managing to keep her voice steady. "And how does this concern us specifically?" Mrs. Jenkins twisted her handkerchief nervously. My husband kept journals, she said, her gaze direct despite her obvious distress. Detailed accounts of his activities with Maxwell, including names, locations, crimes committed. I discovered them after his death, hidden in our home in St. Louis. You didn't turn them over to authorities? Hannah asked, unable to keep a note of judgment from her voice. I was afraid, Mrs. Jenkins admitted, shoulders slumping slightly. These men, Maxwell's associates, they're powerful, connected, not just outlaws, but businessmen, politicians. If they discovered I had evidence against them, she shook her head. I have children to protect, Mrs. Hayes. 3 of them. Hannah's expression softened slightly at the mention of children. Whatever Eleanor Jenkins' husband had done, his sins weren't hers to bear, nor her children's. What changed? Morgan asked, his tone professional but not unkind. Why come forward now after 5 years? They found me anyway, Mrs. Jenkins replied, a tremor entering her voice. 2 months ago, a man came to my home, said he represented former business associates of my husband, said they knew about the journals and wanted them. She straightened in her chair, showing a glimpse of steel beneath the fragile exterior. I told him I'd burned them years ago. He didn't believe me. Were you harmed? Hannah asked, maternal concern overriding her initial suspicion. Mrs. Jenkins' hand moved unconsciously to her left wrist, where Hannah now noticed faint bruising, partially hidden by her sleeve. They made their displeasure clear. Said they'd return, and next time they wouldn't be so gentle, especially with my daughters. So you fled, Morgan concluded. I sent the children to my sister in Canada, Mrs. Jenkins corrected. I came here because, she hesitated, because your names appeared in the journals. Frequently. Maxwell was obsessed with you both. Even after his capture, even in prison, he spoke of you to my husband during visits. Said you had taken everything from him and someday someone would take everything from you. The implication hung in the air, unspoken but clear. Maxwell, even from the grave, might yet pose a threat to their hard-won peace. These journals, Morgan said after a moment of heavy silence. Where are they now? Mrs. Jenkins reached into her handbag, withdrawing a small key. In a safety deposit box at the bank in Bismarck. I couldn't risk carrying them in case I was followed. She placed the key on Morgan's desk. There are 3 volumes. They detail crimes spanning nearly a decade, robberies, extortion, murder. And names, many names. Morgan eyed the key but didn't touch it. Why bring this to me? Why not the federal marshal? Because I don't know who to trust, Mrs. Jenkins replied simply. My husband wrote that Maxwell had men in law enforcement, in government, but he also wrote that Morgan Hayes was the one man who couldn't be bought or intimidated. She looked between Morgan and Hannah. I need someone who will ensure these journals reach the right hands. Someone who understands the stakes. Hannah felt Morgan tense beneath her hand. They had built a life here, a peaceful existence far removed from the violence of their first meeting. Now this woman was asking them to step back into that world of danger and dark secrets. I'll need time to consider this, Morgan said finally. What you're asking, it has implications beyond just myself. Of course, Mrs. Jenkins agreed quickly. I understand. I wouldn't have come if I saw any other way. She rose, gathering her handbag. I'm staying at the hotel in town. Reverend Wilson knows how to reach me. Thomas Wilson stood as well. I should return Mrs. Jenkins to Pine Ridge before dark, he said. We can discuss this further tomorrow if you're amenable. Morgan nodded, escorting their visitors to the door. Hannah remained in the office, her mind racing with implications and possibilities, none of them pleasant. When Morgan returned, closing the door quietly behind him, Hannah was standing by the window, watching the lengthening shadows across their property. You're considering it, she said without turning. It wasn't a question. Morgan moved to stand beside her, his reflection in the glass showing the conflict in his expression. I am, he admitted. Those journals could bring justice to people who've escaped it for years, could prevent future crimes. They could also bring Maxwell's vengeance back into our lives, Hannah countered, turning to face him directly. We have hope to think about. And the new baby. Morgan's eyes widened slightly, his gaze dropping to her midsection. You're certain? A small smile touched Hannah's lips, despite her concerns. As certain as one can be this early. Dr. Patterson confirmed it yesterday. Joy and worry warred in Morgan's expression as he gently placed his hand over where their second child grew. All the more reason to ensure any lingering threats are dealt with permanently, he said quietly. I couldn't bear it if anything happened to you, to any of you. Hannah covered his hand with her own. And I couldn't bear to lose you because you felt compelled to fight battles we thought were already won. She searched his face, seeing the conflict there. Morgan, we've built something precious here, something worth protecting. Which is exactly why, he began, but Hannah shook her head. No, listen to me. 5 years ago, I would have been the first to say we should pursue this, should see justice done, no matter the cost. But now, she glanced toward the door beyond which their daughter's laughter could be heard from the kitchen. Now I understand there are different kinds of justice, different ways to honor those we've lost. Morgan's expression softened as he gathered her gently into his arms. When did you become so wise? He murmured into her hair. Around the time I met a stubborn former judge who taught me that moving forward doesn't mean forgetting the past. Hannah replied, her voice muffled against his chest. It means building something new from its ashes. They stood together by the window as the sun began its descent toward the western hills, casting long shadows across the land they had made their own. Neither spoke for several minutes, each lost in thought, weighing options and consequences. What if there's a middle path? Morgan suggested finally. What if we don't pursue this ourselves but ensure the information reaches those who can? Hannah looked up at him, considering. Marshal Reynolds, Morgan nodded. He's in Bismarck now, head of the federal office for the entire state. He has the resources, the authority, and most importantly, the integrity to handle this properly. You trust him that much? With our lives, Morgan confirmed, which is precisely what we'd be doing. Hannah mulled this over. It wasn't a perfect solution. There would still be risk involved, but it acknowledged both their responsibility to see justice done and their priority to protect their family. I could take the key to him, Morgan continued, thinking aloud. Make the journey to Bismarck, retrieve the journals, place them directly in Reynolds' hands, then return. A week's journey, perhaps 10 days. And if you're followed, Hannah asked, practical concerns surfacing. If these men Mrs. Jenkins fears are watching for anyone connected to the journals, Morgan's expression turned grim. Then better they follow me to a federal marshal's office than to our home. Hannah couldn't argue with that logic, though the thought of Morgan deliberately placing himself in potential danger twisted her stomach into knots. Yet she also recognized the resolve in his eyes, the same resolve that had led him to protect her years ago when she was a stranger in need. I don't like it, she admitted, but I understand why it needs to be done. She straightened, decision made. If you go, you don't go alone. Daniel can accompany you. He's proven himself capable, and 2 riders are less vulnerable than 1. Morgan smiled slightly, recognizing the steel beneath her compromise. Agreed. And while I'm gone, Thomas can stay here. Extra protection, just as a precaution. Sarah, too, Hannah added. She's been wanting to visit anyway to help with preparations for the baby. A small smile touched her lips. Between a former frontierswoman with a shotgun and a minister with surprising skill at fisticuffs, any troublemakers would face quite a reception. Morgan laughed softly, the sound warming Hannah despite her lingering concerns. Quite a reception indeed, he agreed. It's settled then. I'll speak with Daniel and Thomas tomorrow, make arrangements for the journey. Hannah nodded, accepting the decision while silently praying it was the right one. The past had come knocking once again, but this time they were facing it on their own terms, with clear eyes and united purpose. Now, Morgan said, his tone deliberately lighter as he guided her toward the door. I believe our daughter mentioned something about a special dessert she helped Maria prepare. Shall we investigate? Hannah allowed him to change the subject, recognizing the importance of maintaining normalcy, especially for Hope's sake. They would face whatever came as they had faced every challenge since that rainy night in the cemetery, together with courage and determination. The journey to Bismarck took 4 days of hard riding with Morgan and Daniel, covering ground as quickly as their horses would allow. They traveled light, carrying only essential supplies and weapons, staying alert for any sign they were being followed. Morgan had shared enough of Mrs. Jenkins' story for Daniel to understand the potential danger, though he'd kept the specific details of the journal's contents private. Bismarck had grown considerably since Morgan's last visit years earlier. The railroad had brought increased commerce and population, transforming the once modest territorial capital into a proper city with paved streets, electric lighting, and brick buildings replacing earlier wooden structures. The federal building where Marshal Reynolds maintained his office stood prominently near the center of town, its stone facade projecting permanence and authority. Morgan sent Daniel to secure rooms at a nearby hotel while he approached the bank alone, the small key feeling disproportionately heavy in his pocket. The bank manager, a portly man with spectacles and a nervous demeanor, became visibly anxious when Morgan presented the key and requested access to Mrs. Jenkins' deposit box. I'm afraid that's quite impossible without Mrs. Jenkins present, the manager explained, voice lowered as if sharing a secret. Bank policy, you understand, for security. Morgan produced a letter Mrs. Jenkins had written authorizing him to access the box in her absence. "I believe you'll find this addresses your concerns," he said, his tone pleasant but firm. The manager examined the letter, frowning slightly. "This appears to be in order, but still most irregular." He glanced around the bank lobby, then leaned closer to Morgan. "There have been inquiries, you see, about Mrs. Jenkins' box. Men asking questions, not the sort one easily refuses." Morgan's instincts sharpened at this information. "These men, when were they here?" "Just yesterday," the manager replied, dabbing at his forehead with a handkerchief. "Two gentlemen, well-dressed, said they represented Mrs. Jenkins' family interests." He adjusted his spectacles nervously. "They offered a substantial sum for information about any activity related to her account." "And did you provide such information?" The manager drew himself up, offended. "Certainly not. The Dakota Mercantile Bank prides itself on client confidentiality." His indignation deflated slightly. "Though I must admit their manner was insistent, made quite clear they'd return." Morgan processed this development quickly. If men were already in Bismarck looking for the journals, time was of the essence. "The box," he prompted. "I need to access it now." Something in Morgan's expression convinced the manager to forego further objections. He led Morgan to a secure room at the back of the bank where rows of metal deposit boxes lined the walls. Using Morgan's key and a master key of his own, he opened a medium-sized box and placed it on a small table. "I'll give you privacy," the manager said, moving toward the door. "Please ring the bell when you're finished." He paused, hand on the doorknob. "Mr. Hayes, whatever business brings you here, I suggest you conclude it quickly. Those men, they'll be back." Morgan nodded his thanks for the warning. Once alone, he opened the deposit box to find 3 leather-bound journals, each labeled with dates spanning the years 1880 to 1887. Beneath them lay a sealed envelope, addressed simply, "To whom justice matters." Morgan took a moment to examine the journals without removing them from the box. The handwriting was neat and precise, belying the violent nature of the events described. Names jumped out at him, some he recognized from Maxwell's gang, others unfamiliar but clearly influential, including a state senator, 2 judges, and several prominent businessmen. The journals represented exactly what Mrs. Jenkins had described, a detailed accounting of Maxwell's criminal enterprise, including those who had protected and profited from it. In the wrong hands, the information could be used for blackmail or revenge. In the right hands, Marshal Reynolds, it could bring long-delayed justice to numerous victims. Morgan placed the journals and envelope into the leather satchel he'd brought for this purpose, then rang the bell for the manager's return. The sooner he delivered these to Reynolds, the sooner he could return home to Hannah and Hope. Outside, the afternoon sun cast long shadows between Bismarck's buildings. Morgan moved purposefully toward the Federal Building, alert for any sign of the men the bank manager had mentioned. The streets were busy with the normal commerce of a growing city, making it difficult to identify potential threats among the crowds. He was half a block from his destination when he spotted them, 2 men in expensive suits, standing casually near the entrance to the Federal Building. Their posture appeared relaxed, but Morgan recognized the alertness in their stance, the way their eyes continuously scanned passersby. They were waiting for someone. Morgan slowed his pace, considering his options. He could attempt to enter the building directly, risking confrontation if these were indeed the men seeking the journals. Or he could find another approach, perhaps through a side entrance. Before he could decide, one of the men glanced in his direction. Something in Morgan's appearance must have registered, perhaps recognition from a description provided by Mrs. Jenkins, because the man straightened suddenly, nudging his companion and nodding subtly toward Morgan. Decision made for him. Morgan turned abruptly, moving back the way he had come. He didn't run, that would only confirm their suspicions, but walked briskly, cutting down a side street toward the hotel where Daniel waited. A quick glance over his shoulder confirmed his fear. Both men had abandoned their post and were following their pace, matching his own. They maintained distance, not wanting to create a scene in the busy streets, but their intent was clear. Morgan reached the hotel without confrontation, finding Daniel in the lobby, as arranged. "We have company," Morgan said quietly, gesturing subtly toward the street outside where the 2 men had taken positions across from the hotel entrance. 2 men well-dressed, armed beneath those fine coats, if I'm any judge. Daniel's hand moved instinctively to the revolver at his hip. "Plan?" "We need to reach the Federal Building," Morgan replied, thinking rapidly. "Reynolds' office. It's not far, but our friends out there are blocking the direct route." "Back exit," Daniel suggested. Morgan nodded. "Through the kitchen, perhaps, but they'll expect that. We'll need a distraction." As if summoned by their need, a commotion erupted outside, shouts, then the crash of breaking glass. Morgan moved to the window to see a wagon had collided with a parked carriage, creating considerable chaos in the street. More importantly, the accident had drawn the attention of their watchers, who had turned to observe the disturbance. Now, Morgan said decisively, kitchen, back door, go. They moved swiftly through the hotel, ignoring the startled looks from staff as they pushed through the kitchen and out a service entrance into an alley behind the building. Without pausing, they continued at a brisk walk, taking a circuitous route toward the federal building. What's in the satchel? Daniel asked as they navigated the back streets of Bismarck. Must be mighty important for men to be hunting it. Evidence, Morgan replied simply. The kind that could put a lot of dangerous men behind bars or in the ground. Daniel nodded, accepting the limited explanation. Worth dying for. Morgan considered the question seriously. Worth justice being done, he amended, though I'd prefer to deliver it without the dying part. A ghost of a smile touched Daniel's face. Makes two of us, sir. They approached the federal building from the rear, entering through a service door normally used by cleaning staff and deliveries. Inside, Morgan used his former status as a federal judge to navigate them past initial obstacles, reaching Marshal Reynolds' office without significant delay. James Reynolds had aged well in the years since Morgan had seen him last. Still tall and imposing with a full head of silver hair and a neatly trimmed mustache, he rose from behind his desk with evident surprise when Morgan and Daniel were shown into his office. Hayes, he greeted, extending his hand. This is unexpected. What brings you to Bismarck? Morgan closed the door behind them before responding. A matter requiring discretion, James, and urgency. Reynolds' expression turned serious as Morgan explained the situation, Mrs. Jenkins' arrival, the journal's contents, and the men already searching for them. He placed the satchel on Reynolds' desk, revealing the journals and sealed envelope. This is significant, Reynolds said, after examining the first volume briefly. Names, dates, locations. Enough to build cases against people who've operated above the law for years. He looked up at Morgan. You've read these skimmed only, Morgan replied. Enough to confirm their nature, not their complete contents. Reynolds nodded thoughtfully. Probably for the best. Knowledge like this has a way of becoming a burden. He closed the journal, his expression grave. The men following you, they'll be working for someone named in these pages. Someone with resources and reach. All the more reason to return to Pinneridge as quickly as possible, Morgan said. My family. Of course, Reynolds agreed immediately. But not the way you came. These men know your faces now. They'll be watching the direct routes. He moved to a map on his wall, considering. There's a train leaving for Pierre in an hour. From there, you can take the stage most of the way to Pine Ridge. Longer but less exposed than the open road. Morgan exchanged glances with Daniel, who nodded his agreement with the plan. And the horses? I'll have deputies deliver them to Pine Ridge when it's safe, Reynolds assured him. Now about getting you to the station without being spotted. Hannah stood on the porch of the Hayes Ranch, watching the western road with barely concealed anxiety. It had been 11 days since Morgan's departure, 3 days longer than expected for his round trip to Bismarck. No word had come explaining the delay, though Reverend Wilson had assured her this wasn't necessarily cause for alarm. Travel in Dakota, even in 1892, remained subject to unpredictable delays. Sarah Bradford, now permanently settled in a new cabin near Pine Ridge, had arrived 4 days earlier as planned. Her presence was a comfort both for her practical assistance with Hope and her quiet strength that reminded Hannah so much of her own resilience during darker times. Still no sign, Sarah asked, joining Hannah on the porch with 2 cups of coffee. Hannah accepted one gratefully. Nothing. I keep telling myself there are 100 innocent explanations. Weather, road conditions, business in Bismarck taking longer than expected. She sipped the hot liquid, letting it warm her against the spring chill. Yet I can't help thinking of other possibilities. Sarah nodded, understanding without need for elaboration. Morgan Hayes is the most capable man I've ever known, she said simply, and Daniel's no fool either. Whatever's delayed them, they'll manage it. Hannah appreciated the reassurance, though her worry remained. Hope keeps asking when her father will return. She's never known him to be gone this long. Children are resilient, Sarah observed, more so than we sometimes give them credit for. She studied Hannah over the rim of her coffee cup. How are you feeling with the baby, I mean? Well enough, Hannah replied. Morning sickness isn't as severe as it was with Hope, though I'm tired more easily. To be expected, what with teaching and caring for one child while growing another, Sarah said with a gentle smile. You should rest more. Hannah shook her head. Rest just gives me more time to worry. I'd rather stay busy. A comfortable silence fell between them as they watched the road together. The land was greening with spring's arrival wildflowers beginning to dot the prairie in splashes of yellow and purple. In another week, Hannah would have her students plant the school garden, a project that combined practical lessons in biology with the simple joy of growing beautiful things. If Morgan were here, he would remind her to focus on these simple pleasures rather than fear she couldn't control, to trust in the life they had built and the strength they had found together. As if summoned by her thoughts, a vehicle appeared on the distant road, not riders on horseback, as she had expected, but a wagon moving at a steady pace toward the ranch. Hannah straightened, setting her coffee aside as she strained to identify the approaching figures. "That's Reverend Wilson's wagon," Sarah confirmed, her eyesight still sharp despite her years. "And yes, I believe that's Morgan beside him, and Daniel in the back." Relief washed through Hannah so powerfully her knees nearly buckled. She steadied herself against the porch railing, breathing deeply to compose herself before Hope noticed the approaching wagon. Too late. The door burst open behind them, and Hope flew onto the porch, her keen eyes having spotted the wagon from the window. "Papa's home!" she exclaimed, bouncing with excitement. "Papa's home!" Hannah gathered her daughter close, as much to steady herself as to contain Hope's enthusiasm. "Yes, darling. Let's go welcome him properly, shall we?" By the time the wagon reached the ranch yard, Hannah had managed to calm both Hope's excitement and her own churning emotions. They stood together at the bottom of the porch steps, a picture of family waiting to be completed by the missing husband and father. Morgan looked weary as he climbed down from the wagon, his clothes showing signs of hard travel, and his face bearing several days' worth of stubble. But his eyes, those gray eyes that had first held Hannah's in a rain-soaked cemetery, lit with joy at the sight of his wife and daughter waiting for him. Hope broke free from Hannah's grasp, running to Morgan with arms outstretched. He caught her easily, swinging her up into an embrace that spoke volumes about the depth of his love for this child who had helped heal them both. "Papa, you were gone so long," Hope exclaimed, patting his cheeks with small hands. "Did you bring me a present?" Morgan laughed, the sound washing away the tension Hannah had carried for days. "As a matter of fact, I did," he replied, setting Hope down to retrieve a small package from his coat pocket. "A special pencil for my special girl who's learning to write so beautifully." Hope accepted the gift with appropriate awe, examining the polished wood pencil with its brass fitting. "It's beautiful, Papa." "Thank you." She hugged him again, then dashed to show Sarah her treasure. With their daughter momentarily distracted, Morgan turned to Hannah, closing the distance between them in 2 long strides. His arms encircled her, gently mindful of her condition, though it wasn't yet visible to others. "I'm sorry for the delay," he murmured against her hair. "There were complications." Hannah leaned back slightly to study his face, noting new lines of worry that hadn't been there when he'd departed. "You're home now," she said simply. "That's what matters." Morgan's smile held a hint of sadness. "We should talk. Later, when we're alone." Hannah nodded, understanding there was more to the story than could be shared in this moment of reunion. For now, it was enough that he had returned safely. The rest could wait. Reverend Wilson approached, having helped Daniel unload their few belongings from the wagon. "Mrs. Hayes," he greeted Hannah warmly, "I hope our arrival brings you relief. I know the wait has been difficult." "Thank you for bringing them home safely, Thomas," Hannah replied with genuine gratitude. "Will you stay for supper? Maria has prepared more than enough, anticipating Morgan's return." "I'd be delighted," Wilson accepted, "though I should return to town before dark. There are matters requiring my attention at the church." The evening passed pleasantly enough, with conversation carefully steered toward neutral topics while Hope was present. Daniel shared sanitized stories of Bismarck's growth and development, describing the electric streetlights and brick buildings with appropriate wonder for a young man who had never seen a city of its size before. Only after Hope had been tucked into bed, her precious new pencil carefully placed on her bedside table, did Morgan and Hannah retreat to their bedroom for the private conversation promised earlier. "The journals are secure," Morgan began without preamble, removing his boots with evident relief. "In Reynolds' hands, he'll use them to build cases against those named within." Hannah sat at her dressing table, removing pins from her hair. "That's good news," she observed. "Yet something troubles you still." Morgan sighed, the sound heavy with concerns he'd carried home from Bismarck. "The men Mrs. Jenkins feared they were already there, watching the bank, following me." He described the encounter, the narrow escape, and Reynolds' assistance in arranging their alternate route home. "They're powerful people, Hannah. Connected, wealthy, the kind who don't forgive being exposed." Hannah set down her hairbrush, turning to face her husband fully. "You think they might come here?" She said not a question but a conclusion. I think it's a possibility we need to consider, Morgan replied carefully. Reynolds is taking precautions. He's assigned deputies to patrol Pine Ridge more frequently. Asked Thomas to report any strangers in town. But you're still worried. Morgan moved to sit beside her on the small bench, taking her hands in his. I thought this was over, Hannah. Truly over. When Maxwell died, I believed we could finally put the past behind us completely. Perhaps we never fully escape our pasts, Hannah suggested gently. Perhaps they remain part of us, shaping who we become without defining who we are. Morgan's thumb traced circles on the back of her hand, a gesture of affection that had become familiar over their years together. Wise as always, he acknowledged, but wisdom doesn't eliminate risk. If anything happened to you, to Hope, to the baby, then we take precautions, Hannah said decisively. We remain vigilant without sacrificing the life we've built. We trust Reynolds and his men to do their job while we continue doing ours. She squeezed his hands. We've faced worse, Morgan. Much worse. Morgan nodded slowly, drawing strength from her certainty as he had so many times before. You're right, of course. We can't live in fear of what might happen. No, Hannah agreed, but we can be prepared for whatever comes, just as we've always been. She leaned forward to kiss him gently. Together. Morgan gathered her close, the familiar comfort of her presence easing the tension he'd carried since Bismarck. Whatever dangers might still lurk on the horizon, they would face them as they had faced every challenge since that fateful night, with courage, determination, and unwavering faith in each other. Outside their window, spring stars filled the Dakota sky, bright pinpoints in the vast darkness. Like those stars, Morgan and Hannah Hayes had found their light amid shadows, creating a home and family where once there had been only grief and violation. Their souls, once wounded beyond measure, had found not just healing, but transformation. The past might never fully release its hold. New challenges would certainly arise. But in this moment, in this home they had built together, they were whole, complete, at peace. And for now, that was enough.